Thanks. Good evening. Call the meeting to order. If anyone's recording, they make it known. There's copies of the agenda on the front desk if anyone needs one. First item is the minutes for December 10th, 2018. You had a chance to review them? Move your microphone over.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for December 10th, 2018.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That's that. Next, we have an approval not required plan for Borrego Solar, 77 Farm to Market Road. We're good. Floor is yours.
Good evening, Stacy Minahan with Beals and Thomas. So for this A&R, we had submitted it previously, and the town's peer reviewer had comments, namely to add all of the abutters, which we've done, and then we also corrected a property ownership reference for the southern portion of the site.
So this is here basically for signatures.
Yes.
This, let's do those minutes. This was approved at the previous meeting, so we just need to sign the Mylar. Lumpy desk. Smudge that. In that folder. You just want one paper?
Yeah, one paper's fine.
And the next item is an approval not required plan for 71 Charlotte Furnace Road.
Stacy Minahan with Beals and Thomas. This plan was previously submitted and then withdrawn so as not to exceed the 21-day time period, while the question of whether land in Carver could be used to satisfy the Wareham Solar required setback of 50 feet was established. That's subsequently been agreed to that it can be, and so we resubmitted the plan as it was initially drafted.
how was that determined?
The various councils involved agreed.
You have correspondence in your file, in your folder, from council, Rich Bowen, who agreed with the determination that it was acceptable to have land in Carver use for setback requirements.
And so for this particular A&R, there's a place for endorsement by both your board as well as the Carver Planning Board. So when I receive it back from you, we'll bring it there for their endorsement.
I never got a copy of that letter from Mr. Bowen. I never got a copy. I wasn't copied on the letter from Rich Bowen.
I think it was just the email.
I know, but I'm not sure. Maybe that's all they have.
That's all. That's all.
Yeah, I think he did one sentence.
Shall I give this to you, or do you want me to hold on to it and give you everything all at once for recording?
Why don't you hold it? Because we're gonna put everything on at once. Decisions.
Yeah.
Orders of conditions.
Questions?
No, just trying to figure out which Rich is saying what here. I think you're both on the same page, right? Okay.
Good?
Motion to approve?
Okay. And there's a second, Mike Baptiste. Any discussion? All in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Here's the top one signed. You want two of those, or just Carver Reserve?
Why don't you do two? We'll send one over to Carver.
Oh, sorry.
Stacy?
Next, we have the continued public hearing for special permit for Winship LLC, 20 Burgess Point Road.
Hello, Bill Columbia, representing Winship.
I don't know how many are able to make a site visit.
I couldn't make it in the morning, I went later.
They- Well, in your packet is a draft of a decision.
Is everybody in agreement with the conditions with the draft? Everybody's still reading.
Yeah, are these mutually acceptable, these conditions? They've been accepted by the applicant?
They got a chance to review them. The one that they did not want to include was the performance bond.
How do we have authority then to ensure that the work is completed without a bond?
I think that's the reason why the bond is put in.
My comment to Ken this afternoon was, it's not a development, it's not a building, we're not doing anything to the roadways, we're not doing anything utilities, we're not doing anything to the public way. Everything we're doing is within our own property. So even if we had a bond, it's not like the town would go back and stump the lot with the money that we gave you, because it's not gonna be enough anyway. So the idea is all we're doing is stumping. We're not gonna impact the roadway, utilities, the public way. So there's nothing you could do with the bond if you did it. It's basically, we're gonna stump the lot. We've been looking to stump it for 2 years. Pretty sure we're gonna stump it. That's all that we're doing. So there's no impact on the public access area.
The only area that I'd have concern with would be the roadway, because the stumps that do protrude in there could damage the roadway.
If there's anything that's if there's a stump that's next to the roadway, we're just gonna grind it down below grade. We're not gonna pull it out, because we don't wanna impact that roadway at all. We're gonna make sure it's stable. We're gonna make sure that it's okay. We don't plan on pulling, if the stump is adjacent, if it's within 5 feet of it, to pull it out is gonna cause more damage. So we're gonna grind it down as much as we can and make it level and make it safe for driving if you had to pull to the side of the road. So we don't expect to have any impact on that roadway at all.
Well, the concern there would be when the remainder of the stump rots, it's gonna settle.
If it was under the roadway, I've walked that site 20 times now. There's no stumps that are under the roadway at all. There's a few that are next to it.
Well, the roots go under.
Some of the, yeah, but they're 5 feet off. It's, we're gonna make sure that we're just gonna go down to level grade. We're not gonna try to get rid of anything, so.
What's the how do you manage the maintenance of that roadway now? How is that
It's
addressed?
kind of on a rotating basis. Sometimes we've done work through it, sometimes Mr. Deacon, sometimes the people down the road. There's different people that have done different maintenance to it.
There's no specific agreement anywhere?
No, it's not a common shared road. It's a public way that everybody has rights to use. We own halfway to the middle, Mr. Deacon, the people next to them, the people down the street. So right now, we pretty much all, everybody takes care of you. You weed it, you weed whack the edge of it. The town, I think, does plow it. Other than that, it's people have chipped in over the years to do whatever work needed to be done.
But there are certain commitments being made by you. Maybe they're not major, and some, as I understand it, do affect public ways, and you're being required, or you're agreeing to perform finished grading in accordance to a certain specification, and I'm sure you would, to repair any damage to travel ways. So how do we assure the town, or there has to be some mechanism for us to be assured that this will take place?
Mr. Chairman, may I speak? Carl Clemmy. First of all, since we've had your last meeting with you, sir, we sent our engineers out there and had a complete survey done. We own to the middle of the road, and we own from the top point all the way down. It's a private way. We own to the middle of the road. And as you know, Mr. Deacus has sold his land to the Buzzards Bay Coalition. They own the other half of the road, and Deacus owns 162 feet where his fence is. Other than that, we own to the middle of the road, and we've always maintained it. The other gentleman that did it last time was Terry Edwards, which lives on the other side of me. We maintain it, and we fill in the holes and do what we gotta do to maintain it. But we have the only thing we can't do is block the road off. Other than that, we own to the middle of the road. It's a private road, it's a private way. And we've been And we maintaining. do plow it in the winter, when the town can't get down there, we do plow it. So, we own 4 properties there, as you know. We've been there for 70, in the town of Wareham, for 70 years. We own 4 properties and then pay an excess of $50,000 a year in taxes. I don't think we're gonna destroy it. One of my sons is gonna build a house on this property, or 2 houses. We're certainly not gonna live up to our agreement. Being around long enough and been in business for over 60 years, I can assure you we'll do it right. We're just trying to get it done. Thank you.
I would have to agree with the bond not being required. I think that the property owner's gonna do the right thing with the property. And, you know, that's removal of comment number 9 under the conditions. Number 9 under the conditions. But number 8 is, we have the right to exercise a walkthrough at the end.
Yeah,
So
you
I
have it,
think-
yeah,
I
it's
think
on
at
your
that
list.
point, and any future actions on the property will probably have some input on. It just, I really think we need to get past this stump removal thing. I don't think any of us are looking to restore this to the state it was in before, or require that. So, removal of the stumps is necessary for any future use of the property. That's my feeling. And
With
the
that
trust
said-
on-
With that
Trust the
said,
assessment
Mr.
on the
Chairman,
roadway.
would you accept the motion to approve the special permit with,
You have to close the hearing first.
Thanks, Ken.
oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was gonna be an ongoing thing. Mr. Clemmy enjoys spending the night with us, so. Entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
I would.
Second?
Bob can't hear the nod.
Bob, you hear me?
Did you get that, Bob?
Anyway, motion's been made to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Right?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved.
Entertain a motion to accept the special permit with the condition of 9 eliminated from the document as drafted.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Good night. And we have a, pass it on.
Think we warned his night?
No, I don't think so. special permit.
Right, so you have to close the public hearing on the 71 with the findings of the council.
Next, we have a continued public hearing for special permit site plan review for Borrego Solar, 71 Charlotte Furnace Road.
Would you like the latest plans up to facilitate?
Sure.
And I also have copies of the final plans for submission tonight. So these are 7 copies for the board.
Some of these trees come from that site.
Not this site.
This has changed a little as of today.
What's that?
Access for the maintenance. Description of what was happening.
I'm sorry.
Around all of the people's properties. That's changed as of today. With Wareham apartments.
It wasn't changed in my text.
No, it's not changed in the text because we never did the permit.
But the text doesn't have to be modified.
Well, this isn't technically accurate. The access is around the perimeter instead of just through the center. So I don't know how much.
It was just done today. I suggest that we had contemplated that this decision was to be filed tomorrow. What I can do is send him tonight a changed page if I know exactly how to change it.
Okay.
I don't want to
We can mark
raise
it
an
up.
issue here
Yeah.
tonight. Here.
Could you identify what changes have been made in the plan?
So the 2 outstanding items, as I recall, it was at the last hearing, we had not received confirmation as to the 50-foot setback question extending into Carver, which we subsequently did receive confirmation of, so that's reflected in the design. The design changes, however, are just from coordination with Wareham Fire in terms of what they wanted to see for access. So we've added a ring road around the panels themselves in the north. It's 20 feet wide, as Wareham Fire has requested. We also coordinated with them regarding the access to the south, proximate to the reservoir, because there's a few locations where we could not get it to 20 feet, and they confirmed that that was acceptable, that their approach is typically they'll work and be flexible on the dimensions if there's a physical constraint like the reservoir, but elsewhere they want to see the 20-foot width. So that's the design revision here.
And none of these other access points from Charlotte Furnace are going to be used.
Kind of adjacent to the site from Charlotte Furnace, correct. Yeah, the plan is to access the site from the south. We can't access through the utility easement, unfortunately, due to changes in how the electric company requires access. And we preferred not to cut through the wooded area from Charlotte Furnace because it's rare species habitat, so we're planning on coming in from the south.
Let's just say around the arrays. Around the arrays. I'll email it. And then I'll just ask them to swap the new 3 for the old 3.
That's right.
Why are they using battery now? Is that the new technology?
Yeah, it's about integrating the system with the grid at an optimal time. Basically, when there's so much distributed generation in the area right now that when people go to work, you got peak production in the middle of the day, there's an excess of energy, so it's going back through the substations and up into the transmission lines and out. At this point, we can take some of that production from the middle of the day, store it in the battery, and then discharge it either in the evening when people are getting home and cooking dinner and turning on their air conditioners and TVs, or if it's not needed then, we can save it for the morning. So basically taking peak load and shifting it to, one more time?
Eliminating the surge?
I wouldn't call it that way. It's called peak shaving, or it's called load shifting. But I think that's the concept you're trying to talk to.
So, unrelated to the approval process, but you're saying that related go through the battery?
Not all of it, only a portion of it every day. So we'll set the system to basically fill the battery every midday, and once the battery is full, all the power will go out to the grid, and then that extra power will be diverted and then discharged at the end of the afternoon after the sun sets. It's primarily to solve intermittency, which is the biggest issue with renewable generation. When the wind's not blowing, when the sun's not shining, where do we get power? And all of a sudden, we're taking a certain amount of that power produced every day and storing it in the battery for use off-peak or off-production.
This particular parcel expanded anymore, is this it?
I'd say the parcel can be, but the project cannot be. It's bordered on the north and west by natural heritage area. That's why we're driving our access road so far from the south. So we have no plans to work with natural heritage to remove any land there. And to the east is all Carver land, and then to the south is the existing system. So no, we have no plans to do a phase 3.
No intention to work out
None.
I was just commenting, no intention to expand the department.
We do not.
Questions, concerns?
What we're doing here is this was already prior approved.
This is the site plan review special permit. The A and R was approved pending the determination of the Carver.
At the last meeting, the other two projects were approved. This one, we're still waiting on some council to discuss the setback in Carver, but this project is not yet approved.
Although I will add that the footprint of the panels was previously approved years ago by the board. The change is the proposed access location as compared to that prior approval.
Thanks.
But that special permit had lapsed, and
We elected to refile newly to cover the project.
The upper panel, is that going to require earth removal, or is that going on existing grade?
Existing
It's
grade.
Yeah. There's actually no grading proposed within this area. It's already all flat for the panels. It had been prepped for construction.
It just appeared when they did the first clearance.
I know, so it was quite a change in elevation there, that's why I asked.
Mhm.
Any other questions for the board? Charlie, you have anything?
A couple of questions. How do we know that there won't be any regrading based on the fact that a portion of the buffer is now in Carver? That width, that piece that you propose for Carver is roughly 34, 35 feet wide, which means that the balance of the buffer zone has got to be in Wareham. So, seeing the scale of the plan, it's hard for me to see whether or not there would be any regrading that's necessary in that section.
So I'm not sure I'm following the question, but let me answer this and you can tell me if it answers your question. Per one of your original comments, I think, in the review of this project as well as the other two, was to maintain the 50 feet off of our limit of work. So that's what we've done, and in this area, the limit of work is essentially coincident with the fence line. So we've taken 50 feet off of that fence line so that there'll be a 50-foot undisturbed area. There's no...
In those sections that you were working, the location of the panels and the location of the drive of the access road was outside the 50 feet. In this case, you've encroached on the 50 feet that would be around it if you weren't going into Carver. So I'm just wondering whether or not there would be any regrading necessary because you have pushed or expanded out closer to the boundary line than you were in some of those other areas. So I'm just-
Regrading of the existing site as it is today?
Mhm.
Not in the northern area. I just want to look at the plans to confirm that I'm not misspeaking.
I'm not referring to those two. I'm referring to the portion which is abutting the town of Carver.
So here?
That's correct.
So the existing grade is a steep slope down from the Carver town line, and the proposed access road is at the bottom of that slope.
I know it varies from 70 to roughly 80 feet. There's about a 10-foot difference in grade. With the scale of the plan, I can't tell with the location of the fence and the location of the road whether or not the changes in grade are going to require any regrading to get the road into the location that you have it shown.
I mean, I can say that our engineers looked at the design and designed it based on not needing grading there, based on our existing topography.
What is your concern, Charlie? Is it
yeah,
a drainage concern
I'm
or?
following the...
Well, we talked about not impacting existing grades in other areas on this project as well as the other two that we discussed. The fact that it had already been sloped years ago and so forth, and they were staying outside of that area. So they weren't going to be cutting into the existing slopes that were in those other places. From the scale of this plan, I can't tell that. When you look at the plan, it's either 80 scale or it's 100 scale, which is relatively small scale, to figure out whether there's any changes in contour lines and so forth that have to be adjusted. That's my only comment with respect to that. The only other comment I had was more for Mr. Cirque, and that was, how do you interpret Section 230 of the zoning bylaw, where it talks about when you're going into two different districts, and this relates to this issue that we've talked about with respect to the town of Carver, which I can see from the case law that you had suggested that that is probably the case. However, in those cases where it was overturned, it was because there was no condition within the zoning bylaw that restricted the depth to which you could go. Section 230 suggests that where there are two districts, you can't extend into the more restrictive district more than 30 feet. How would you interpret that section in terms of how you're applying this in this case where you're going more than 30 feet?
I read that as referring to a use that would not be allowed in the receiving zone, but which is allowed in the initiating zone, so that you cannot have that initiated use protrude more than 30 feet into the receiving zone. In this particular case, the receiving zone, in this case, the town of Carver, is merely having its land be passive. There's no active use that's crossing the town line, no active use that's crossing a zone line. We're just asking that the land in the town of Carver be available to serve the buffer needs.
But you're saying that the Carver land is less restrictive than the Wareham land, then?
What I'm saying is that there's no active use that's crossing the town line between Wareham and Carver.
But that, I realize that, and that was part of the case law that you've presented. However, the zoning bylaw doesn't discuss whether it's active or passive. It simply says that it can't extend more than 30 feet into the less restricted zone. So I'm just wondering how you would approach that.
I don't believe that leaving land in its current state unchanged, whether it be on the Carver side of the line or the Wareham side of the line, represents any conflict between the two towns. Because in both towns, a parcel of land can, if required, remain in its natural state, in this case, in order to accommodate the setback requirements in the town of Wareham, for a facility totally within the town of Wareham.
Which the town bylaw appears to do to the extent that you go 30 feet, but no more.
But Charlie, I believe that the manifest intent of that section is when you're having a use or a structure in the initiating zone that is prohibited or regulated in the receiving zone in a way that is not the case in the initiating zone. In this particular case, that doesn't obtain.
Oh, you answered my question. I'm not sure that I agree with it, but I'll let it go at that.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify this. So if the panels themselves, we could break the town line and go in 30 feet into Carver.
Well, in that case, we'd need relief from Carver, because the use would
Structure.
the use would be occurring partly in the town of Carver. But in this particular case, the panels are totally within the town of Wareham. So the only question is whether we can satisfy the setback requirements imposed by the town of Wareham by using land in the town of Carver for that purpose.
Is the perimeter road in the town of Carver?
No. All work is within Wareham.
The entire perimeter road is in the boundary of Wareham?
Yes.
The fence as well as the road, Mark, appear to be at least 50 feet away from the extent of the new property line that they created in Carver.
Yeah.
My only question was whether or not it was going to require regrading within that 50-foot buffer zone, which it's supposed to have, and it's supposed to be a natural buffer zone. If the regrading is essential, then I'm not sure that that's the same as what it was in the other places where the applicant agreed that they would simply let those graded slopes fill in on their own and not disturb them any further by other regrading.
And to that end, if I may, this is an item that Charlie and I had discussed before, because as I see it, these sites, this site, 160 to Honnet, are bare, sandy soil right now. So if we go in a month or 6 months and regrade it and then leave it alone, it's essentially the same as if we left it alone always, because there's no vegetation there right now. So from my perspective, and I know Charlie and I disagree on this, but if we regrade it and then establish the 50 feet from it, you're still getting that vegetative buffer. But because we were able to draw the 50-foot line farther away on these sites, we said, okay, we'll take it from our limit of work so that you have a 50-foot that we aren't touching. I think in this case, if there's a concern that the road and fence may not be able to fit or it can't be seen at this scale, we could certainly, if it's amenable, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, concede to a condition that if it becomes necessary to do work within what we've established as the 50-foot in terms of grading, and again, to me, that's the same because it still will be vegetated when the project is done. But if we need to do grading within that, we could come back and readjust the lot line to go 50 feet from that limit of work. But what our engineers have designed, as of right now, there's no proposed grading within this vicinity. We certainly could revisit that if that's a concern of the board. And I don't know if I'm being clear about kind of where I'm seeing a difference from what Mr. Rowley is seeing.
Mr. Chairman, can we treat this as a minor or major change circumstance? Meaning if there's a major grade change or importing, exporting a material that changes the characteristic, they'll need to come back to the board, just as we would with any special condition.
And I think the concern, correct me if I'm wrong, please, is you'd prefer to just have the 50-foot not touched ever, so that it can, from this day.
Well, the bylaw says that you're supposed to maintain a natural 50-foot buffer.
Right.
You've received concessions on other things. In this case, you're moving into an area which is now beyond the town line, and I'm not going to argue that point, but all I'm saying is that if, only because of the scale of the plan, I can't tell whether regrading is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, don't touch it. If you're required to regrade it, then my recommendation would be move the fence and move the road. If you have to lose a panel or two, you lose a panel or two.
I think that sounds fine.
It's not any big deal in terms of the overall capacity of the field to generate the electricity you're looking for if you have to move a panel or eliminate a panel to make sure you don't have to regrade.
That's right. It feels like we're overcomplicating it a little bit, but as the plan's drawn, there's no work proposed within the 50-foot, and as was suggested, if for some reason during construction work is necessary, then we'd either come back, push the lot line, or remove some
My
panels.
recommendation would be that you establish it right now that there will be no disturbance of that zone, and that if it's staked out at the beginning, it's found that regrading is necessary, you move the road, you move the panels.
We're comfortable with that.
Pardon me?
We're comfortable with that.
On your site, that line looks pretty stable between 70, where the access road would be, between 72 and 76 feet roughly. But when you get over the Carver line, it's quite.
Not going in Carver.
Right.
Anything else from the board?
Nope.
As he throws the plans at you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
Yes, please.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded
Second,
to
Bob.
close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Propose we start a solar festival. So, the cranberry thing anymore is just celebrate solar panels.
Son, was being-
Everybody will show up with Windex and paper towels.
Just throw cranberries on the solar panels and make craisins.
There you go.
Everybody likes craisins.
There is a proposed decision in your packets, if you've had a chance to review.
I think I will tell Mr. Buckland now what I'm going to send them.
Just have to add to it, what we agreed to, right?
Just looking. Was the decommissioning agreed upon amounts?
The decommissioning amounts have to be agreed upon.
We provided decommissioning estimates for all three of the projects, and I believe they were all agreed upon at the last meeting, but happy to talk through those if you have any open questions.
And that suggestion made by Charlie, how should we include that?
Well, I don't know, do we need to make an adjustment? I mean, you're stating regrading is not required at this point. So if we go to the number 4 in the final section here, and it talks about no changes in the approved site plan shall be made without the approval of the planning board. So I think it's understood that if you do have to grade, you're going to need to come back here. That would be considered a change at that point, on the Carver side.
Not doing anything on the Carver side.
No, but
Within the 50-foot.
within the 50-foot side, yeah.
Yes, sir.
So if this, do we need to add anything more then? I don't know.
You can say that it's in accordance with the plan that's submitted and that there is no grading in the buffer. You can make a finding on that.
Right.
No grade changes or to the Carver parcel?
I think we have to reference the current plan, the January 14th,
Yeah, agreed.
2019 plan in this decision.
Right.
Specify that there is no grading within the buffer.
You just note that on the plan itself, so it becomes a permanent part of the plan
We note that in
Plan
this,
revision?
we had this in the decision.
into here, okay.
Excuse me, I just lost. Charlie, forgive me.
Sir?
What did the two of you agree on? The language that the two of you just agreed on?
I tried to suggest that I think the appropriate way to do it would be initially to stake out the line of where the fence is going to go, so you know where the end of that 50 feet is, because it appears they're putting it at the 50-foot line. If when that's staked out, it looks like in order to get a level area, that you don't have a slope that goes into that at that point, you move the road and you move the fence over so that you don't have to regrade. If when you stake it out, there's no grading necessary, then you continue with the plan as it is.
And if there is, you eliminate a panel or two?
That's correct.
We put that in writing?
That was my recommendation. I don't know that that got transmitted.
Well, it sounds reasonable.
Yeah. And it was agreed to.
Make
But
it
the plans also state that the placement of the panels is not permanent and final. There's adjustments and corrections that will be made at the conclusion of the project.
Inward, not outward, but
Exactly.
I think both are accomplishing the same thing.
Not at the conclusion, at the beginning.
No. Right.
There's a statement on the drawings on the
That
placement
refers
of the
to-
panels.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
That refers specifically to the row spacing in the panels. It's a fairly standard comment on a permit set as opposed to the construction set, but yeah, the point is within the permitted area. We're not expanding the envelope without further permitting if it was needed. But as Charlie stated, we're happy to stake out the limits of work prior to putting a shovel into the ground if it makes everybody feel more comfortable. And if it happens that the plans don't match what's out there in reality, then we would come back and modify those plans or shrink the array such that there was no work required outside the development area.
Took that down.
So under number 2, in the inspections of each site, be made by the planning board board's representative for all site work, including the following. And A will be the staking of the road, access road.
I think we should say limit of work.
Limit of work probably is
Yeah.
right. Yeah. What, did you write something as well?
Well, I think probably, you wrote in a different spot, I just,
Well, on condition number 1, I also want to specify the plans, the date.
These are dated today, January 14th.
there'd be no grade changes made to the Carver parcel, which is not on the plan, and any grading required within the 50-foot buffer be corrected by adjusting the field.
That's what we agreed to.
Anything further? Should I make a motion?
What do you want it to say? We're closing?
Well, you did close.
Entertain a motion to accept the the decision for 71 Charlotte Furnace Road. With
77.
71.
No.
Sorry.
Charlotte Furnace Road with the change as recorded by Ken.
Okay.
I'm not gonna go through all that verbiage. I'm confused. But we agree with you, Ken.
Second.
There's a second, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You wanna fill that in and have them,
And sign it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Why don't you just sign your copy, since I marked up this one. And I'll have a signature page, additional signature page.
ones are just written decisions.
Their decisions as well. You don't have a hearing on those ones, so you closed the hearing already on those.
So A and B on, that block is gone, right? Draft.
You have draft decisions for 77 Farm to Market and 160 Tyhona. I think when we addressed these last, we didn't have a decision written up.
77, okay.
That's why they brought them in all at once.
Oh.
Confuse us.
I think that's part of their job. How come that roll's not as big as the last one?
It was a looser roll for the last one.
I thought it was being slated here.
I actually noticed that earlier and double counted, just to make sure I hadn't forgotten copies.
Checking, that's all.
Same number of sheets, but tighter rubber bands.
Actually, this one might be a fewer number sheets as well, since it's a smaller area.
We all have tablets, so we can just open these up.
Be cool.
This meeting,
They'd have to be in Braille.
And there was just one minor change to this site after the close of the last hearing. That was to change the perimeter access road to a 20-foot gravel width instead of a narrower stabilized grass.
And how did you accommodate that?
We shifted the road. So this site, like the others, is clear of trees, although there is herbaceous vegetation growing, but we were able to accommodate everything within generally the same footprint as previously. The one difference is in the south central where the access is proposed. It's via an existing agricultural access road, and we shifted the gate southerly a bit so that we could ensure that Wareham fire trucks would have adequate turning radius around the site. We had already had a full perimeter road, so it was fairly readily accommodated.
I think the perimeter road should be outside the fence, but
We did discuss that internally and with Wareham Fire in the beginning. I think well, this is my assumption, but they want to get into the site so that if someone is having a medical emergency in the corner, they want to be inside the fence to access that person. I don't think the concern is as much a fire concern as a medical access concern if a maintenance person is having, a medical emergency.
We can make a go-kart track for you if you really want one.
And on this site, actually, you'll be able to drive around the fence probably as well, since
Down the
it's
southern corner,
so flat.
It seems like your panels are getting awful close to the gravel road. It's gonna encroach at all?
Are you looking here and here?
Yeah.
It is close, but with a 20-foot gravel road width, I don't think it should be an issue.
Truck isn't 20 feet wide.
Right.
You seen someone 5 minutes while you drive?
Well, you got room for the training wheels.
That's right, nice.
Was this the one we were worried about, the view coming out of Wareham Lane? The berm is gonna hide that?
I think the discussion of the view, excuse me. The discussion of the view is coming north on Farm to Market Road at the original, the construction access to the very southeast corner. Across Winterberry Lane is fully vegetated with a berm. But again, after construction, we're gonna close up that open area. All operations maintenance access will be from the south along the agricultural road, I think known as Land of Lakes Road.
Salted or unsalted?
What's a compost mulch to? I notice it's, on the bottom, there's one up in the north west corner.
Compost mulch tube?
Yeah.
It's a sedimentation prevention. It's a, like a filter sock, one of those round tubes that's filled with mulch that you put instead of hay bales and silt fence.
Like the ones we had on Toby Road, we take it. Is that what those
Yeah,
compost mulch
They
tubes?
waddles.
Yes, straw wattles, yep. And this plan set is dated January 9th as the final revision date.
And when you say the property line to be eliminated and the future property lines, how is that done?
So that was done through the A&R process that we voted on earlier tonight.
It wasn't me, it was a manual. No, I got mine right here.
He's slid over to look at a plan. It's inadvertent.
You know, they're like an evil goalie, huh?
Where do I reference the date of the plan set?
Yeah, we're gonna have to add a reference on the plan set. That'll be on the first condition. Plan.
Can I get a motion?
approve, now it's 77, right?
Yep.
Draft decision. Especially, the site plan review, approval. Ask-
Second?
Sorry, Bob.
Motion to approve the site plan for Borrego Solar, 77 Farm to Market Road. Plan dated January 9th, 2019. Is there a second?
Second?
Mark said.
Did you? Okay, sorry. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one for 160 Tight Hornet Road. Put that in the solar bylaw. All solar projects plans must be from the site.
This one's even tighter than the others.
It got tighter and tighter as I was running out of room.
Just taking note of frustrations with the board.
So for this one, the only change was we had shown a 20-foot stabilized grass perimeter road, and we just changed it to gravel surface instead, per Wareham Fire.
Charlie, do something.
Just gotta invest in a smart board and have them submit electronic. This is crazy. Well, it's just not even efficient time here. It's just, we gotta digitalize this stuff anyways, aren't you?
Yeah.
landing's tough.
Landing stuff, there was that old airstrip.
Where are these panels built?
One more time.
Where are these panels built?
Most panels are built in Asia, in the Asian area. The specific panels for these projects haven't been spec'd yet. It's not likely that we'll start construction on the sites until the spring of what year is it, 2019, 2020. So the solar panel installation happens about 3 months after that. So we're a good ways out for what exact modules we select, but likely from Asia or Taiwan.
Is there a subsidy involved from the government?
Not specifically to the panels, but when you build a solar project in the United States, you get a federal incentive tax credit, which is basically a 30% of the project value you can credit toward taxes, the project owner. That happens at the residential level, and it happens at the medium scale level that we're operating at
So
here.
we're subsidizing it a little bit, aren't we?
On the federal level, certainly.
No, we individually.
On the me too.
You're welcome.
On multiple levels, we're subsidizing.
Tariffs haven't affected the panels?
They have.
Is that why this is not going to 2020?
No, the utility is going to take quite a long time to get us ready for upgrading. You can imagine I think the most recent project was the Blue Wave group of projects built just south of the Wareham substation. They had to build as fast as they could to capture the SREC 2 incentive. I believe they'll be dormant for quite some time, waiting to be interconnected by the utility. What we like to do is basically start the utility, and when we know when they're going to be done, we backwards schedule our construction from there. So that's what roughly puts me at spring of 2020 to start. Takes a long time.
That's all right.
Ken, what's the requirement for exercising the special permit? How much time can you let run before you actually exercise it?
Our regulations allow 2 years,
Okay.
To commencement.
yes.
Not like a building permit, then?
No, it's not like a building permit.
Well, I believe our language says substantially complete, right? 2 years.
Does it require a building permit?
It does.
Do you have to get that within
Electrical
6
one,
months? Or start construction within 6 months?
Yes, but we won't pull the building permit until we're ready to go. From a design standpoint, we'll convert this set to a 50-plus page design set, or excuse me, construction set that'll have exact panel specs and all that. So we'll want to wait as far out in the future as we can to utilize the best technology at the time of construction.
The standard is that the improvements shall be made within 2 years of the approval of the plan unless an extension is approved by the permitting authority.
And that would imply completion.
Imply completion.
So 2 years, January 20. It's close. I think if the board would entertain making it 3 years, it's a big portfolio of projects, a lot of work, but I'm also happy to show work has commenced and come back to the board for an extension if we needed it. But 3 years would be my preference.
Is that for all three?
All the projects will be built in tandem, so forgive me if I misread that from 2 years to commencement, but if it is to completion, I think 3 years is appropriate.
But you would start in 2 years?
I think it's a lot, I mean, I guess, think about how we define completion. Is completion a construction or interconnection? We would certainly start within 2 years. Completing the projects from when we put the shovel in the ground on the first one to when we finish off the last one, it could be closer to 3 years. I think our intent would be to do it as fast as we can, but the construction schedule is a little bit out of our hands when you get a utility involved.
My feeling is that we extend it now. Otherwise, if they have to come up for an extension 2 years from now, the entire climate could change over there and it could be challenged.
Mr. Chairman, the boilerplate on your decisions says that if substantial use or construction permitted by this special permit and site plan approval has not commenced within 2 years from the date on which a copy of this decision is filed with the town clerk, then this special permit and site plan approval shall so expire. So the text, and I believe it's boilerplate.
We're quoting from the zoning bylaw, Ken. So I don't think it would be appropriate for us to make it 3 years. The 2 years with the availability of an extension is with the way it reads. And extensions are not unnecessarily withheld. Understood.
Well, just so we can set a little bit of precedence here, what is considered completion then? Is it actual driveway into the
That's
grid?
always been an area open to interpretation. Substantially complete, I think, is the way it's written in the condition. And as long as there's work progressing, the board's not put the brakes on.
Well, in the sense of a building, it means it's usable, but there are things to be completed, touch-ups and so on. I don't know here how that would apply, but
From town to town, it obviously varies. Generally speaking, we have a milestone called mechanical completion. Basically means we're done. We're waiting on a third party to finish their work before we can start, I guess, occupying or operating the system. So mechanical completion is often akin to what a board would call substantial completion.
Just from knowing a little bit about DEP and conservation, when they say something is substantially complete, it means that it essentially complies with the plan that's been approved. So it would seem appropriate that if within that 2-year time frame you're getting close, that a simple application or whatever needs to be done to ask for the extension of time for whatever it takes to complete it would be the appropriate way. I don't think you can necessarily agree to the 3 years now because the zoning bylaw says 2. I don't think you can waive that. The zoning board might waive it, but I don't think the planning board can.
But the applicant is gonna have to make some progress before 2 years. I mean,
Absolutely.
Let's say, past practice of the board is if it's an active project, there's no disturbance in that.
We're comfortable with that. I only bring up the 3 years because the question was posed, but if the bylaw so states 2 years, I think on the conservation side, we have 3 years. Does that sound right? But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happy to go with the 2 years, and if we need an extension, we'll discuss it, and we'll show the work we've made in the 2 years. It's a
Yeah,
long
as
time.
far as conservation's concerned, their order of conditions is good for 3 years.
That's right.
So it doesn't mean that you have to be completed within 3 years. You'd have to ask for an extension if you're not within 3. But look, chances are you will be.
Yeah, I'm happy not to overcomplicate it right now. I think 2 years is a good start for this evening.
Ken, you're the only one here 3 years from now, so whatever you want.
My shoulder's getting heavy.
Gonna make a motion?
To make a motion to approve the project at 160 Tohonet Road as stated in the conditions and per the drawings. Dated what, December
January
8th?
9th.
January 9th?
second,
Where's Tohonet?
You call it Tyhonet.
Yeah, it's behind the farm to market offices.
Just playing with the pronunciations. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Trust.
Okay.
They roll these all. He's been down on Main Street.
Hey, George, something's missing down Main Street.
Yeah.
Find any antiques?
Any more what?
Find any antiques in there? Any relics in the wall?
My son said, was gonna call Sammy and said, there's supposed to be a cannonball in that building. I don't think they found anything. Next item is the street acceptance report for Candlepaper Lane. This is as requested by the Board of Selectmen, we need to issue a report. There's a letter in your packet from Charlie, who did a inspection of the construction of Candlepaper Lane along with the proposed layout. And he's found everything suitable to recommend acceptance by the town.
Make a motion?
Sure.
I move that we recommend to the Board of Selectmen approval of the layout of Candlepaper Lane.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll get a copy of that from you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll write that letter because the Board of Selectmen are going to hear it on tomorrow night.
Okay, great, thanks.
Do you want a copy of the letter?
Oh, sure, yes.
I got an extra one.
Sorry, Bob, I didn't realize that's what you were hanging around for.
Close with the territory.
All good for the whole time.
344 Glen Charlie Road, request for,
You had seen this one last meeting. The problem was there was nothing on the tape. I believe you saw it. No?
yes, we did,
You discussed
I don't know
it.
if it was last meeting or the one before, it was the proposed antenna site
That's correct. The south
across,
side.
across from the White Island Fire Station. On the,
And the 61A, as you know, is an abatement for lack of holding back on development of the property. Essentially a tax abatement. And the town gets the right of first refusal for any time that is
Walk
lifted.
down there?
yeah, it's kind of up closer to the Glen Charlie Road. The bog is here and the circle, as I recall, kind of sits up.
Sits in the middle of the parcel.
Is it in the middle, or is it up close to the road?
Well, it's,
The circle is the drop zone.
yeah. The only part they're leasing is the 5,000 square feet or so.
What is the purpose of the lease?
A cell tower.
How tall is it, Ken?
I don't know.
Okay.
We haven't had a zoning review of it as yet.
Geez, if our cell towers were obsolete? Guess not, huh?
Looks like it needs a special permit if it's more than 40 feet high.
It's unfortunate to have the extra structure when we got a water tower right across the street, but
That was my next question.
I know.
Is it in the fall zone of a water tower?
no. got a zone, drop zone. Now, our determination does not preclude another board or committee in the town from,
Making a decision otherwise.
yeah,
You're making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, the action they should take on the release of the 61A.
Is it gonna be a visually pleasing solar tower, or we don't know?
Oh, I don't know.
Look-
Sometimes,
make it look like a pine tree.
I hope not.
oh, those got character.
I think we should make it look like a solar panel.
Make it look like a windmill.
They go up and down the Hutchinson Parkway in New York, they got those pine tree ones. Made them look like.
They stick out like sore thumbs usually because they're way above everything else. There's one off of Route 95 or the Mass Pike.
Yeah.
It looks dumb, because everything else is down here, and this one's up here, and it's got all kinds of,
I will tell you, it does perk you up for a few seconds, you know?
There was
yeah,
one,
away
I
from your,
think, along Route
away
1.
from your driving, right?
Saugus up that way, there was one, by his old soldier's home, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, what the heck, what's that doing there?
You know who their biggest customer is? The Catholic Church. They buy all this, they lease all the space off the steeples. It's the only thing keeping a lot of these churches open.
Well, put more money in the basket when you go on Sunday.
I could come up with a better suggestion, but I'll leave it alone.
Who's representing this? I mean, we don't have any drawings?
I don't think so.
This is a question of whether we feel the town should exercise its right of first refusal on the property.
I think we should buy it and grow marijuana up there.
That's what the bog's gonna do.
It's a good place.
Is it the Westgate property?
I believe so.
You own that whole stretch down there.
Now or formerly.
Well, the daughter.
But the town owns this now?
No.
No.
But it's in 61A. It's got an agricultural exemption.
Yeah.
And when it comes out of 61A, town has first right of refusal, and then they pay, what, 5 years taxes?
Something like that.
The difference.
Can I speak to this?
I think we
It's
should,
more informational.
we should buy it for open space, I think.
It's 5,000 square feet they're offering, right? In the middle of a lot.
Right.
Let me just sit down here. Jim and East Cranberry Highway, you know me, but, so I kind of had discussion with Mr. Buckland the other day. I think the minimum lot coverage for development there is 130,000 square feet, right? So they're asking to take out 5,000 square feet for commercial venture. I just don't understand the process there. If it's 130,000 square foot minimum lot to do a development, or to put a house up or something. How can you say, I want to take out 5,000 square feet so I can put up a cell tower and rent the property? I don't know.
It's essentially an easement. It says that there's a use of a portion of the property, just the same way that there could be a water line going through or some other piece of infrastructure, an
Yeah,
electric line.
This is not a subdivision of land. They're not
Right, right.
subdivision. They're just saying they want to take X amount out of 61A.
Out of 61A,
What is the total parcel size?
2.99 acres.
Oh, so even taking this out, they're still at 130, yeah.
Yeah.
Part of it's Cranberry Bog, though.
Mm,
It is, it's
Yeah.
wetland.
Well,
Well, you need 6 acres to be in a 61A. So if that bog, there's got to be a lot more land than that,
6 acres of agricultural, or does that include upland?
upland and all included, contiguous property.
the same company owns, an LLC owns it up out of Branch, owns the bog that you see, and the parcel next to it, and the parcel next to that. So my question was just basically, you know, they want to pull out a postage stamp out of that subdivided 2.99 acre parcel which the whole thing was 61A. And I just, my own frame of thought is, how do you pull out this tiny postage stamp there? And I kind of understand what you're saying, but just kind of goes against the idea. And, if you live on the pond, you're going to be, all of a sudden this, I don't know, what the tower's going to be, 80 foot? If it's under 40, it doesn't have to go in front of special zoning, right? Over 40 it goes special zoning.
It's an allowed use in each zone according to the zoning bylaw,
Right,
but if it's over 40 feet in height,
SPZ,
then it
right?
requires a zoning board special permit.
That's another argument. But thanks. I just kind of, I still don't understand why it's that way, even though you kind of explained it. Thanks.
Still don't know what we're deciding on here.
Does the planning board feel there is any reason for the town to use their right of first refusal to purchase this property?
We're talking about purchasing 5,000 square feet, or, well, considering we're trying to sell property to keep the coffers open, I don't think we got any money to purchase property, let alone a 5,000, what are we gonna do with 5,000 square feet?
Yeah, I don't see any compelling need for the town to capitalize it unless they were gonna buy it and put a cell tower on
Yeah.
it, or a windmill.
Steel pine tree.
Ken, are we missing any justification to own this property?
Not that I see. You may want, one option is to think of some quid pro quo
Does it have
for
access?
release.
There's no access to the pond, so it has no value to us. You might
Yeah.
want to go kayaking or something, so you can get a nice little cove in there. There was some nice parties when we were kids. Oof.
Yeah, it's a good sized bog.
Yeah,
Is the entire parcel under 61A, Ken?
yes, it is.
Even though there's residences on it?
No, that bog's small. That's not all the bog,
That's the parcel.
that's the property. Beachfront.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Westgate owned property from there all the way down East William, didn't he, at one time? He was the oil man, or the coal man originally.
What's it zoned?
R130?
Culture.
So,
So basically what we're doing is making,
Where's the proposed tower?
say, the town don't want it, kick it down the road to somebody else.
say we see no reason for
On
the
cleared
town to
land.
Yeah.
exercise its right of first refusal. Is that a motion?
Second.
Unless there's something to be gained, I don't know. Just bring up a good point. You got residential use on that property, you got waterfront, you got now a commercial use or proposed commercial use.
Well, this doesn't guarantee this is gonna happen. The butters need to be notified. There might be an objection to.
Oh, I'm sure there will be.
Well, the abutters is all family,
Well, okay, then we'll see how close the family is.
you know?
The,
I mean, if it depreciates the property, I don't care if the guy's my brother or not. He just cut my value in half. I don't know.
well, the neighborhood was dead set against cell towers on the water towers. Anyway. Was there a second?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, second,
Mark,
yeah.
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Going for, 2019's looking good. We got a world record going here. Be out of here in 2 hours.
You guys are good.
Candle Piper, George? That's next. You missed, you skipped it.
No, we did candle paper.
Good, yeah. That was quickie. That was the quickest, that's the record, right?
Yeah.
You didn't even see it. You voted, but you didn't.
You have a memo dated January 14th, 2009, on the articles for Springtown meeting recommendations.
I have an old one. I have a November.
You should have a one-pager, two-sided in your packet.
Ah.
And these are the possible articles for the 2019 Springtown meeting. We'll have to hold hearings on all zoning articles for the planning board. Our general business of the annual town meeting is going to take place April 22nd this year. And election day is going to be April 2nd.
What do we got? The redevelopment authority lobbing stuff at us again?
Right, and redevelopment overlay district. This one doesn't have to have marijuana in it.
Floating zoning district?
Yeah, floating zoning district, so it could be applied as a special permit in a location.
What is it? Could you, can you describe the process and what it means?
Yeah, floating zone, you've created the zoning bylaw with the design standards and the density requirements and all of the criteria that you would apply to a project that you would expect within the town. And then when a developer wants to use it, they ask for a development review. It's very similar to the conservation recreation zoning district that gets applied when all the criteria are met.
Boy, that sounds like snob zoning to me. So you're giving somebody carte blanche. I got a widget wheel, I think I'm gonna do a redevelopment district. Yeah, boom, and we're gonna give an overlay district in that area.
How is that different than special permit?
Well, you're creating an overlay district. Overlay districts, like I said, that's basically snob zoning, I believe. That's the way I feel. I think it would be challenged.
Is there a particular area in town they want to apply this to?
Downtown.
But why?
To improve the downtown.
But why not do it within the confines of the existing bylaw? Just improve. Would this floating zoning district have prevented, we're on public record now, right?
Is this floating
right,
district only going to be downtown? I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
No, you would define the geographic area it could be applied. I mean, it could be something that could be applied to east Wareham Cranberry Highway.
Well,
Say
abstractly, we could say, we just gave up a postage stamp up in Shangri-La. Theoretically, we could have said we wanted to go and put this floating redevelopment district to make a kiddie park or something out there. That wasn't allowed, basically, or some developer.
Where is the context
You
of these
have no
proposals?
there's no boundaries. In other words, it's anywhere within the boundaries of Wareham.
They haven't been developed, fleshed out as yet. This one has not been fleshed out as yet.
Fellas, I got the same issue here that I had at the last town meeting. This stuff's getting thrown. Something this big,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen in 4 months. This is a study, this is a, 2 or 3 option proposal that gets put in front of us, that gets reviewed. I mean, something this big is a 12-month planning. It's not, this is the first I'm seeing this. Has somebody had a discussion about this before?
No.
And we're about 8 meetings away from town meeting again, and, you know, this is very suspicious to me, that somebody has some behind-the-scenes plan right now to get this pushed through, and they're not sharing it with us, that it's gonna be put on our shoulders again.
I agree with you 100%, absolutely.
You know, if this wants to be proposed, I would recommend that it gets proposed by some other committee other than us.
But also, we have enough zoning districts and enough regulations that nobody enforces.
Yeah.
And you have the mess being built
Yeah.
in Wareham, right and left.
Yeah, prove that the overlay district that we just approved is gonna hit 100% capacity.
We don't need another one. We need some enforcement.
Oh, this one's good because it's a floater.
It's
That's
even,
what's
it's even better,
dangerous.
yeah,
That's,
yeah.
like I said, this is, a citizens group would challenge something like this as snob zoning. Seriously. Hey, we want to go up Blackmore Pond Road. There's a lot of good land up there. Let's go up there and, what can we do to destroy that neighborhood?
I'll be honest with you, from the last town meeting, you know, again, I'm not a lifelong town meeting person here. I'm a 5 years window here. I think our goal tonight should be take this list of 9 and agree on the top 3 that we want to bring to town meeting. Because we really don't have time to you know,
That's right.
carry the torch on 9 items at a town meeting. They're not going to give it to us. Somebody's going to come up with some.
Well, the sixth on our agenda, the last 6 are probably in that top 9 that we should be looking at. The top one, scrap that one right off the bat.
I think one that we should look at carefully is the solar bylaw.
Yeah.
I included a handout from a modified handout from the town meeting where the regulation was first adopted.
Where's that?
That's it, that's this one here, it says Planning Board handout, Article 14.
Okay.
And in that, I used the handout because it includes the sections that had been previously amended at town meeting. And within, on page 5 and 6, I've included the changes in setbacks and tree clearing. This is text that is very similar to text that Charlie Rowley found in town of Carver. And we can take that and use some of the dimensional requirements that are specified in there as more, because they're more substantial and more protective of residential districts.
I'd like to ask for the last time, is there any hope of eliminating solar from any residential district? That's what I would like to see.
This would be the place it would happen, right?
That's right.
If we look at that list of 6 on that front sheet, why don't we make that priority number 1?
Solar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you do is you look at the table of use regulations, section 320, where it specifies a site plan review for a large ground-mounted solar in R130 and R60 zoning district.
If you eliminate it from all residential zones, where do you perceive it happening?
Off the record, nowhere. But answer to your question, industrial, commercial, agricultural.
Let them be creative. Change.
I mean, these 3 that came about in front of us tonight is exactly where it should go.
Well, those are in residential districts. They're in the
It's
R130.
agricultural land in an R130 in a residential district.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. It's usually agricultural, it's been taken out of the district that it's in, so most of it's in the R130, right?
No,
No.
No?
no.
I don't see where it just says agricultural, when I
We
look at
don't,
this.
we don't have an agricultural district.
That's what I'm saying.
We have residential, we have industrial, we have commercial, we have marine, institutional.
We have
I
a lot
think-
in agricultural use.
I think it's
Correct.
appropriate to deal with regulations, because if you try to take out everything out of residential zones, you'll end up with panels on Cranberry Highway or in whatever is left over the industrial park, which is virtually zero. There isn't any room to do those. And the state bylaw says you have to make reasonable regulations to allow it. So personally, I think the appropriate way to do it is to do it through regulation. Carver, when they did theirs, which is right off of Charlotte Furnace Road, where you were dealing with tonight, when you read that one, it's pretty stiff. And if it could pass muster with the Attorney General, there's no reason, in my view, why something like that wouldn't work with Wareham.
The town of Carver was upside down when one came in Purchase Street. Remember that one went in there? And, I mean, they did a lot of work on that.
I think the no in industrial is appropriate because I don't want to see our industrial land and jobs and businesses displaced by solar fields.
Put them on the rooftop.
Or the parking lots.
This is ground-mounted solar.
I know, but I'm saying, put the building up, require them on the rooftop.
But you don't get anywhere near the amount
Okay.
of capacity out of putting it on a building rooftop as you do out of a field the size of what's been coming before this board.
No, but
They just don't work
You get
that
the
way.
industrial buildings going up, you put people to work,
But there won't,
getting a
if you look,
tax base.
but if you look at the amount of space which is left in the industrially zoned land, there's not much left that isn't already occupied.
Which might be changed moving forward. You know, the zoning in different areas could be changed. I don't know if you've looked at the vision master plan and whatnot, and recommendations and how to change zoning. I mean, looking forward, to get a little more space in those areas by transitioning, you know,
Well, you'd have to-
current uses to other areas, and then gaining that property for industrial, commercial use. But I mean, it's,
Well, the other side is they are constantly changing their emphasis on where they want solar. You know, a few years ago, they were pushing building mounted. Now they're stressing large ground mounted arrays, you know.
well, there's a
next year.
carrot there for there's a carrot for the person, the people
Yeah.
putting it in. I'm looking more at the practical aspect of how to utilize clean energy. I don't think you should clear a forest if you don't have to, but if you're putting up a building with a relatively flat roof,
And put it over the highway.
or along the highway. Go ahead.
I withdraw my insistence. We've talked about it, Charlie. I agree that if we can make the requirements stringent, that's the best we can do.
I'm just looking at this list again. I really think we should just focus on the items that are proposed by this planning board and the town planner. If the redevelopment authority wants to propose something, they need to come and speak with us at our meeting firsthand. We can't represent every other committee in this town at these town meetings. Unless you're telling me that's what we signed up for.
No, that article that was passed last town meeting over our recommendation.
So,
Played fast and loose with how articles are notified.
So I look at this list, Mr. Chairman, I see the solar bylaws, yes, I think we all feel strongly we need to improve the direction here. Site plan review was proposed by us, design guidelines was proposed by us, and then Ken, you proposed matching funds on the grant. You know, so
You
I,
don't have to take that to a public hearing.
what's that?
You don't have to take the matching grant funds.
Okay, so we're really down to,
You're down to the first 6,
we're down to,
and down to 5.
well, I'm down to number 2. I'm down to number 5. Number 6,
And that
Then
would be
you-
the zoning article.
that would be it. Those are the only 3 The grant is just you and us, right? We don't have to go to public meeting, so
Right.
we just, I mean, there's 3 items, we got 3 months before town meeting, we focus on 1 item each month, 2 meetings a month, and we can do our due diligence getting this done with proper notification. We pick one of them tonight to put out public hearing for February's meetings.
I would recommend also you consider the front yard storage bylaw, number 3, and the sign
And the
bylaw.
sign bylaw.
And the sign bylaw.
And I'm saying, let the selectmen propose that themselves in the
Well, it's a
inspectional
zoning
director.
bylaw, so we'll have to conduct a public hearing and make a recommendation.
Well, I thought maybe that's why Mr. Slavin was here tonight. Wasn't this one of his,
He wanted to hear the outcome on Candlepaper Lane.
Well, he also wanted to be a part of the zoning discussion as well, too, because he would like to see the planning board advance the zoning as.
I can't, I honestly felt ambushed at the last town meeting, that we didn't have a discussion with the selectmen on something they asked us to represent. Other than Peter coming in here in the 11th hour.
I believe the selectmen have asked for all the articles to be submitted by February 2nd. Is that the date?
It's probably the closing date of the warrant.
No.
No?
The warrant
When does the
legally
warrant close?
closes 30 days prior to the meeting, but there's been a self-imposed.
February 4th is the last day to submit all articles, except for citizens petition.
I'm, based on the experience you had last time, and this is just my own personal thought, it's not in any way kind of a recommendation, that you hold off on any public hearings until you're sure that you're through with everything that you're going to recommend. That was one of the issues that came up. There were so many changes and so many things that either did or did not get submitted to the town clerk, so that there was a clear record of what was being asked for. That I think that it's appropriate to, even if you have the right to hold a public hearing within 2 weeks of town meeting, I believe.
That's right.
So I would recommend, just my own personal point of view, that you hold off on the hearings, but work through whatever the details of the proposed bylaw are going to be that you want us to recommend. When that's all clear and there aren't any more questions about it, then you notice it and you advertise it and so forth. You can ask, can't you ask the Board of Selectmen to hold a place?
Yes, you can.
So that way it gives you time to work on it without feeling that you're under a constraint of having held a public hearing and have to make a vote on something. It's just a personal thought, that's all.
In terms of this list, we have completed number 5. That's done. So we're down to solar, design guidelines, and if we want to tackle sign and the storage. But
Has,
Article 15 has been talked over, and I think we all agreed. I have another copy for you, Ken.
Yeah, you just have to take that to a public hearing.
Right, but
well, the sign by law, that exists from last town meeting, right?
That's right, you have the text from last town meeting of the sign bylaw
So
and the
we can
nuisance
review
storage.
that and we also have the front yard storage nuisance,
Okay.
but there were some objections brought up on that at the public hearing.
For the nuisance storage.
Yeah.
Yeah, the interpretation. And I think we have to have the Director of Inspectional Services come in and have a,
Is that campers, trailers, boats, is that a different one?
that's the one.
That's the one.
Definitions of, kayak, canoe. I mean, can you look at what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts considers, a vessel? Something that requires a motor, or is,
It was also
just
fencing in stuff that was, I remember one gentleman brought up a good point, even though we got the assurance that, minor things would not be enforced, you still leave somebody with a cloud over their head that any day they're gonna get written up for having their rowboat sitting in the front yard.
The only way to do this is you go and take 50 pictures and you put it on a slideshow at that town meeting and you say, that one's in violation, that one's in violation, that one's in violation, and show these folks what violation looks like. Because, again, this is gonna be the same 400 people that aren't focused on what's being said here. And then how do we enforce this? This is all left on the shoulders of the inspectional services?
Yes, it is.
Well, I guess the observation is, why aren't they being enforced under current?
Because the Director of Inspectional Services doesn't feel the regulation is written that allows him to enforce as needed.
Does he even have the personnel to enforce this?
They just hired
He stated that cases he's brought to court, he's lost because
The way it's written?
the way it's written.
because it doesn't have enough teeth in it, but right now, like motor vehicles, it's very clear what's in there, but without adding boats and campers to it, I don't know why. I say, unless you're standing in the courtroom.
Or junk. Just junk, unusable, but, you know, its
But see-
usable life it's gone beyond its usable life.
But that's not what the town's definition of junk is.
Well, but I'm just,
Town's definition of junk is, right after you walk out of the store with it, it's used, it's junk.
right, what I'm saying, I think the definition by state is it's no longer in its usable state. You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. You might have a use for something, but, you know, it's non-usable state. A couple of towns have done it under nuisance and blight. Not a lot. I think no matter where you go, it's difficult to enforce.
Have you been up at the Grange Hall in West Wareham in the last 6 months?
The where?
The Grange Hall in West Wareham, Galt Road, Main Street?
Yeah.
Talk about blight.
Oh, you're talking right there, was that Mill Road?
Mill Street,
Yeah,
yeah, that little
yeah,
junction
yeah.
there. That's blight.
But how do you address that? That's what I'm saying. You define it so that you can address
There
that,
is an existing bylaw that addresses it.
which says, go ahead, I'm sorry, Manny.
No, procedurally, I would rather, this discussion, forgive me, is not getting us anywhere. Could we tackle them one at a time, starting tonight?
Sure.
And could we go, I mean, we have to read the thing. The solar bylaw seems to be one of the very important ones. Can we just focus on that and get it? Do we all agree, by the way, that number 5, site plan review, is done and complete? We had a meeting, it was a formal meeting, too. We've covered every item. I submit, it's finished, should be submitted. After you let me review it, right, Ken?
Right, the planning board has received the memo from Emmanuel, and if you want to have any other input on that one, feel free to contact me, but
Yeah.
next stage, I think, would be to take it to I think we're ready to take it to a public hearing.
We've spent a lot of time on it. Number 5, as far as I'm concerned, I submit, and for your consideration, check with Ken, but it's finished, it's done, so we've got one out of the way. The next one I think we should look at is the solar bylaw, and that's what's in here, right? Ken?
That's correct.
Let's read it and let's decide on it tonight. Or we do it at home.
That's, what is the proposal for the solar?
To change the setback requirements in the residential districts.
How is that written?
And we're going to page 5 to
Page
Carver's
5.
recommendations?
Yeah.
Right.
Setbacks. Front, side, and rear setback shall be at least 50 feet from the applicant's property. This was the case with the last one we just did on Squirrel Island?
That's correct.
That was 50 feet.
But provided, however,
Provided, however, that where the lot is located in a residential district, the setback shall not be less than 200 feet from the applicant's property. This includes 200-foot setback on all lot lines abutting the residential district, regardless of the zoning designated for the proposed site. Vegetated screening shall be provided for a minimum of 50% of the specific setback. So Squirrel Island Road would now need 200 feet on all sides.
Correct.
Was all four sides of that property residential?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
The others, well, I guess you're saying the agriculture is residentially zoned, so 200 feet on all sides, and then 50% of that setback
Good.
shall be vegetated. So what does the 50% mean? The first 100 feet from the curb in? Is it 100 feet of vegetation and a break of 100 feet of view, and then 100 feet of vegetation?
Well, if you go on further, it says if the project is located in a residential zoning district, the screening on all sides shall obscure from view at least 50 or 100% of the project from adjacent properties within 3 years, so there's a growing season of the start of construction or earthwork activities, including views from upper levels of existing structures existing at the time of construction of the solar energy facilities. So those houses that were across the street, you'd have to consider the second story.
Shouldn't it say 50 to 100% of the project? Or?
You can.
So in 3 years, you should be able to stand on the second floor of those colonials and not be able to see that still.
At least 50% of the view is gonna be blocked, or potentially 100.
What's the alternate to providing required screening? You could increase this back to, what's the point of that? If you go 600 feet back,
The depth of the project,
Looks
doesn't
like
matter
a
how high
tunnel.
the trees were, if the project went deep enough in, you would never be able to cover 50% of it.
unless it's down in a
In a hole,
hollow.
Right.
in a hole.
What's the point of that paragraph, Ken?
I think that's just to make it significantly more restrictive, and essentially make it near impossible to build in most locations.
The alternate to providing required screening is
You get 600 feet away.
600 feet with screening.
As an alternate to providing the required screening through vegetation, it is acceptable to increase the setback 600 feet.
And then put a stockade fence and a single row of vegetation. So instead of 50% of the required screening, vegetated screening,
Oh, okay.
you can put a stockade fence and a single row of vegetation in close proximity.
Good example of that would be the Charlotte Furnace Road one, because that whole solar field is set way back from Charlotte Furnace. But under the proposed bylaw, they could come within 200 feet if they put in an intense vegetation for that 200 feet and made sure that you couldn't see any of the solar panels on the second floor. But clearly, they met the second option there by the fact that they are located so far to the east of Charlotte Furnace Road.
So let me take you on Toby Road for a minute. The yellow house at the end of Toby Road that's on Main Street can see that solar farm that Engrid put in there. What would they have to do to block that?
Shade it, because it's the south side too.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
whole corner there that's closest to Toby and Main would either, probably wouldn't be there because of the potential for vegetation that you need.
Well, it wouldn't be there anyway, because it's not allowed in industrial anymore. But if you, a similar situation where it was allowed, yeah, you'd see it.
So for the projects that we just talked about tonight, and I had said, coming off of Winterberry, would you see these? And he said no. Is that what he said? You wouldn't be able to?
He
When
said
you're
that-
coming out, the berm from the first project extends down partway. And after that, you're going parallel to it.
If he has to come back for an extension 2 years from now, is he gonna be subject to these bylaws?
No.
No, he'd be protected under the existing special permit,
Unless they let it expire.
and then he'd be up a creek.
So go back 600 feet and then you can put a fence, but unless you're willing to go back 600 feet, you cannot use a fence to berm.
You have to use natural vegetation.
You have to use natural vegetation. And what if natural vegetation is not conducive to, well, I guess you're gonna have to spend money.
Well, I bet you, that particular application, I bet he's 600 feet from the residential use. By the time you figure Farm to Market Road, the houses don't start there, you gotta go in a ways.
All right, so what's the next paragraph say?
Excuse me, where does it, where is the reference to second floor and not being visible from second floor? What paragraph is it in?
That is in the last paragraph
Okay.
of page 5, in the middle of the paragraph. The discussion here is the
Okay,
screening on all
okay.
sides shall obscure the view
All right.
of the project. And giving 3 years for the start of construction or the growth to occur, so that this will include views from the upper levels of existing structures existing at the time of construction of the solar energy facilities.
That first sentence, if the project is located in a residential zoning district, the screening on all sides shall obscure from view at least 50% or 100%. That doesn't
It should say
make sense.
50 to 100%.
Why not just make it 100%? Is that being too stringent? Too strict?
Yes, too strict is the reason why I was given the 50%. I don't know, this bylaw is, Carver came up with a fairly stringent bylaw anyway.
I think in the case where you had natural buffers, like if you want to use that as an example, the whole back side of that property was wetland and bog. So you're really not, you wouldn't need to, there's quite a distance from any neighboring property. You wouldn't have to screen it 100%. It's kind of natural
And
screen.
in some cases, it might be okay to have a very limited view of a portion of it. Thinking of the Blue Wave section that's off of Route 25.
Yeah.
If you look hard at the beginning of it, you can see the beginning of those panels, but as you go along, because of the change in the topography and the vegetation that was left, it completely disappears. So that would be a case where it's between 50 and 100, I think. So there might be some cases where a glance at it, yeah, you're gonna see there's a solar thing in there, but you're not gonna get something like Toby Road.
And then on page 6 is the tree clearing. This doesn't come from Carver. I didn't see this in there, but the idea that there's some limitation on clearing, but including historical clearing of.
Should there be anything there as far as mitigation for every, 1-to-1, you want to clear an acre here, you gotta put an
Plant.
acre under conservation restriction.
That'd be an option.
Another option might be to limit the clearing, similar to what they wanted to do over at Blue Wave. The one on Route 25, there was a limit. They couldn't clear anything less than 50 feet in height. They had made a calculation that the setback that they had from the panels to their chain link fence, I think it was such that they were fine with anything that was under 40 feet or under 50 feet. They were allowed to clear any tree within the buffer zone that was 50 feet or higher, because it would place a shadow on the panels. Anything under that did not impact them at all, so they were required to keep it there. And one of the things we also did on that was, instead of going in there and ripping everything else by the stump, which is what they wanted to do, was they simply snip off whatever they were going to cut. That way, if they cleared an oak or they cleared a maple, you'll get sucker growth coming back up, which will give you a very dense boundary close to the ground, which would increases the amount of visual density that you don't see. So limiting the height or asking for a calculation as to what the minimum height could be around the perimeter to avoid shadowing might be something to consider to put in there, that they would have to provide you with that information. They did on Blue Wave. They haven't done it on the others that we've seen. But it would help.
I like this paragraph, 50%, but the Burgess Point that we just talked about, what is, permit is needed if you're clearing less than 50,000 square feet?
Correct.
Or greater than 50,000?
More, 50,000 or
Greater.
more square feet.
If there's no other project that's associated with the clearing mark, that's the difference. They had an issue where they simply cleared more than 50,000 square feet, and they don't have any plan for doing anything else. In the
But
case of these solar
If he
things,
simply came in here and said, I plan on building 2 houses,
if, he doesn't even have to come in here and do that, except for a Form A plan to divide it into 2 lots. Once he does that, he doesn't have to come in and
50,000 square feet per parcel of land?
yeah.
If you had 2
50,000
abutting
square feet.
parcels?
Contiguous, 50,000 square feet. It doesn't say that, but
I don't know if it says
you'd
that.
have
I believe
to
if he
assume.
had a separate, if he had 2 or 3 separate lots, he could clear up to 50,000 square feet on each lot.
That's a lot.
Sure.
So if you were gonna put a solar farm in and you had 3 lots and they were 49,000 square feet apiece,
Well, if you look at this, you can't clear over 50% of the lot.
well, that's with the intention of putting up a solar farm. But if I
Well,
just said, it's my property, I pay tax on it, I'm clearing 49,000 square feet on each lot.
You could do that.
And I could come to you within 6 months of that and saying, I changed my mind, I wanna put a solar farm up. You can't tell me I violated anything.
No, in that case, he wouldn't. But he'd have to have an application for a site plan review for a solar farm.
Well, under this, if you cleared over 50% of the site, the solar farm, you've got 4 years to wait.
But I'm saying if, just being clever here for a minute. I got 3 abutting lots. I clear 49,000 square feet, 49,000 square feet, 49,000 square feet. 150,000 square feet is now cleared.
I would consider that
can't stop me
more than
from doing that.
50,000 square feet being
Huh?
cleared. I would consider that more than
I
50,000.
think the wording is clear, that would be regulated. It says that no person shall undertake clearing or grading activities of an area greater than 50,000 square feet at any one time or in increments such that the total land area of abutting property within the control of any person graded in a 36-month period will exceed 50,000 square feet, so it includes adjoining property.
Yeah, it would.
And this goes back to the land, I think, where the Flagship Cinema is. That land was clear cut and stripped right down to the sand, and then it sat there. And it was how many years later
Yeah, and
before?
the whole idea of that was so that somebody could see it from Route 25 when they went by.
Speculation.
Yeah. But if the clearing is connected with the construction of a project that's been approved under a special permit, or is somehow otherwise allowed, like a subdivision, then that particular section of the bylaw doesn't apply. It's only if you're clearing land without some other permit attached to it.
So in combination with what you said, allow up to 50% to be cleared after a study has been conducted showing what can be,
I gather from what the bylaw says that if I had a 100-acre parcel, for a solar farm, I could only clear up to 50 acres of it. If I had a 20-acre parcel, I could clear up to 10.
what happens in the case of a cranberry bog where you got all this cleared property around it right now?
Well, not all that has been cleared for 5 years.
It's less than 5 years since it's been cleared?
Oh, yeah, it was all cleared before the plan was proposed.
Yeah, but,
Agricultural.
so you have a piece of property that has no vegetation on it right now, like the surrounding area of a cranberry bog.
Mhm.
You get, I don't know, 10 acres. It's just a sand pit. And your total parcel is 20 acres of land. So you can clear 50% of the 10 acres that has vegetation on it?
Doesn't say, just says 50% of the property.
So you wouldn't be able to touch anything that, do you guys know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it should say,
If this room was a parcel of land and, you
instead
know,
of saying of the property, it should say of the parcel proposed for solar, probably. Yes.
I'd agree with that, George. Because if you took a piece of property that had a lot of open space that was agriculturally used, they had cranberry bogs on it, that doesn't make sense. So it does
I'm
make
sitting
sense
on-
to me if it's
I'm
for that portion.
sitting on an 1100-acre parcel, and I want to put a solar panel over here.
Yeah.
well, what I'm saying is, this room is a parcel of land, right? So take an aerial shot from a satellite, and from the center line forward is all sand. From the center line back is all woods. And you just told me I can clear 50% of my property for the purpose of the solar farm. Well, okay, then I'm gonna clear 50% of my property. I can show you a picture 5 years ago that there was nothing here. It was all a sand pit. I just cleared 50% of my property. I'm building solar on the entire piece of property now.
Just figured out what a lawyer is paid to do.
Yeah. Or a greasy Italian guy, one or another.
How many people have a property like that? There's the people that are doing it now.
Well, I'm saying,
Few that have a parcel that's 20 acres, that 10 of it's empty or virgin. or
yeah,
wide
but
open.
if we go to the end of Squirrel Island Road, that sand pit where the first solar farm was,
Yep.
was just, there was nothing that needed to be cleared there, I don't think.
They cut quite a bit in the wetlands in there.
But, okay, so
We're in
now,
violation.
they talked about another open sand pit area. If that open sand pit area was adjacent, same property owner to a wooded area and said, I wanna make, just like I described, you could take that open sand pit and another 20 acres, 50 acres, whatever you wanted, constitute as one activity and clear that.
Well, you could do that now.
The thing is, you'd be up against the vegetation screening requirement that's put in here as well. So it wouldn't be to your advantage to get rid of vegetation that you could be using as screening.
But I don't know. It depends on what is in sight.
Could you say standing vegetation?
Well, I don't think it's so much the amount of area as it is that it's the area that is going to impact the surrounding countryside. It's like they say, if the screening applies to it, and you've got 100 acres and you can clear 50, you still got to manage the impacts from the visual sighting of it, and you still got to maintain that screening aspect of it.
You're making the presumption that there is a view from all sides of the solar farm. You know, in the case of Squirrel Island Road, there was only view from two sides of that solar farm. The folks that were on the opposite side of Squirrel Island Road, and the one fell at the end. The only way I could see that coming out of my house off of Blackmore Pond was you'd have to take down every single tree. There was nothing on the Blackmore Pond side over there. So I only have to worry about the vegetation on the sides that we actually were holding them to.
How would it sound, to your point, no more than 50% of the project's footprint may be cleared of trees?
That would, yeah.
That doesn't work either, because how do you say I want a project? If you've got enough land that you can put a project the size of what we saw tonight, are we saying then that they could only use 50% of that area and they'd have to reduce it in half, even though they have the potential for what we saw tonight? I'm not sure how you would make that work.
Well, I guess probably if we did the reforestation type thing, where if you're gonna take down an acre of trees here, we want you to put a conservation restriction on an acre of trees somewhere else, so.
Maybe there needs to be a little bit of better understanding as to what was intended by the 50% factor.
I don't think any of that
Well,
was the argument with the Squirrel Island Road people. It was a
Well-
visual problem. They didn't care about the environment and carbon
One of
dioxide.
these existing sites we saw tonight, they cut down 40 acres of trees to put in a solar field,
In the middle of nowhere.
you know.
So
What's
they'd,
more-
they'd have needed 80 acres in order to put 40 acres in.
Right.
They would have needed to protect 80 acres to clear 40 acres. So you would gain at least 40 acres. If they want to put in a 40-acre site, you would have gained 40 acres of protected forestry, correct? Under this bylaw.
Right, it would have to stay deeded to that solar farm, 80 acres.
If you want to do 40 cleared, you need 80.
Right.
Maybe that's the calculation then. The protected land, the vegetated protected land has to be double whatever the proposed
Equal to
solar
it,
farm is. Right.
right?
So if you propose a 100-acre solar farm, you need 200 acres of land. Just like, I mean, essentially, this is a cranberry bog formula, isn't it? I'm not a cranberry guy, but you need, you need so much protected around that bog. To
Well,
make that,
I could put a bog right up to your house if I wanted to. You know, a bog
Yeah.
doesn't need any protection. That's something, you put in there for your own, safety or whatever.
That may be the case, but his math is correct, his calculation.
Yes.
yeah. You need at least a 150-foot perimeter around the entire bog. Based on conservation protection, right? And then,
No, because, well,
considered a wetland area?
Not all bogs.
under an agricultural permit, you're not subject to DEP regulations. If you're putting brand-new bog in upland, or brand-new bog in a wetland, then yes, but if you're managing an existing bog, you don't have to be that far away. There are other stipulations and things in there that might become an issue, but there's no requirement that you manage a perimeter of 150 feet.
So, okay, so that's why I'm not a bog owner. Let's go back to solar panels for a minute.
One of your cranberries anyway, so.
Go back to Squirrel Island Road. That, it would probably be cost prohibitive to even move forward with that if we had this 2-to-1 formula on there. They wouldn't be able to get up enough panels. You gotta you gotta obstruct the view, and you have to have twice the surface area of the panels. And that they could essentially only get half of what they were proposing to us, unless he owned the abutting properties, which he may have, but.
No,
Hmm.
he didn't.
Well, in that particular case, they owned all the way to Blackmore Pond Road, so
Yeah.
it would be.
So in the case,
I think they already A&R'd that lot, so that piece would not have 50%.
so in the case of the 3 tonight, you're tying up some big chunks of land right now, which it's probably cost prohibitive for Barago now to do this project, because they would be forced to lease twice what those panels were on.
One of the things we can do is send our draft bylaw around to, as we did previously, to solar developers and see what their reaction is.
Oh, you know what that reaction would be.
Yeah.
Was that taken from Carver's?
No.
I think it's down the right path, but
It is.
but it's a 2-to-1 formula in which the 50% that's not solar panels need to have 25% vegetation coverage. And not, somebody's gotta work the math out, but, so some of the 50% that's not solar panels does not have to be pure forestry. Some of it can still be open, but at least 25% of it has to be. You need twice the amount of land and at least 25% remaining full vegetation.
Well, I think in some cases, and I don't know how it would affect, like you mentioned, Blue Wave, that was pretty much land of low value, most of that site.
It was pretty good land that they stripped off.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was all kind of,
Behind the town barn, that was nice land.
oh,
Access was limited.
I know when it got up near the highway, it was pretty good, but in the back, wasn't it?
That,
all kind of-
that entire piece, that entire section was all upland, all heavily wooded.
And all that sandy soils, like they're
That
building on
piece
a
in
big
fact,
one.
they had a huge sand operation up there.
Yeah, it was,
At one time, it was good, it would have been bought if the price of cranberry stayed up, or if it was feasible to, to cultivate the land. There was a vineyard up there at one time, remember that? They tried that. They talked about solar, wind towers up there. Eaton did at one time, that was that stretch, that goes right to the reservation.
But I like that term low value. Is there a definition that goes with that? Because maybe that's one of the only justifications to convert residential land, if it's deemed low value. And how is that determined? I mean, clearly, wetland area is low value, but
Well, then you got conservation issues.
yeah. and
It's all
who
under
determines the value?
61A. Most of the land at these big open spaces, it's already buried under tax, protected under taxes under 61A. So it's low value. As Charlie referenced, the access to Blue Wave, which, I mean, that is what, 4 parcels involved in that, is limited. So then the land, even if you strip it, is low value if you take it out of the 61A because there's no access to it. So how much does the town make off a project like that?
The solar farms,
Yeah,
they get pilot agreements and do better than, do at
And-
least as good as commercial use of the property.
The landowner gets all the credits.
It's basically no load because there's no services provided.
correct. Landowner gets the rent, the solar company gets tax incentives, plus money for the generation of the electricity. The town gets a what, in lieu of taxes?
Payment in lieu of
Yeah,
taxes.
payment in lieu of taxes.
I'm sorry, payment?
Payment, a contractual agreement to pay money instead of having taxes.
But this guy from Parago last meeting said the town will yield about $200,000 off of this deal.
Out of the three of them,
Yeah.
is that per year?
Well, I think that's in the lifetime of the project,
Which is it, Ken?
over a 20-year lease period.
Okay.
I hadn't heard, don't remember that number.
Yeah, we asked him what the benefit to the town was gonna be. I doubt
Forgive
we're
me.
making 200,000 for 20 years.
Under
So they're giving
61A,
it to
no?
the town and we give it back to them through our subsidies. It's such BS, it's unbelievable.
But, so what is the ultimate objective here, is to be fair to the abutters? I guess there's a couple things. There's conservation is one thing. Land conservation, natural wildlife, that's one of our goals. But we keep running up against this brick wall of the abutters, the view of the residents of Squirrel Island Road, the,
Destruction of natural resources.
well, the destruction of natural resource, but I'm thinking about the Megpiece stuff here tonight, is that, was the view an issue? Only in a couple cases was the view an issue with those three.
No, but if they wanted to put in 40 acres, they'd have to have an 80-acre site.
If
So
we
40
leave
acres
If we
protected.
left it at 50% of the property may be cleared of trees, no more than 50, unless part of an approved forest management project or an equal amount of land is placed in conservation restriction.
Or a double-sized parcel. So let me ask you this. If Makepeace wanted to put up 20 acres of solar array, and they said, okay, I got a 40-acre parcel, can the remaining 20 acres of parcel that we want them to preserve be a cranberry bog? Because that's probably what it would be in the case of these here anyways, right? I don't know. Were there cranberry bogs adjacent to?
Yes, there were.
Yeah, there was for Blue Wave, adjacent to the stuff for Borrego, there were, but
So you gotta be
Yeah,
very
adjacent.
specific in saying, it's not just acreage of land, it's 50% has to be, or 25% has to be wooded or natural vegetation.
Natural state.
Because you might need 3 times the amount of the solar array. If you had this cranberry bog, you might need the solar array, 20 acres, the cranberry bog, 20 acres, and then 20 acres of woodlands.
I'm not sure that that's what it means, Mark. That's why I was suggesting maybe we need some clarification. Let's suppose I had a 20-acre parcel, and I had a cluster of trees on one corner of it. Part of it was just open grassland, maybe it was an old field, maybe it's part of an old farm. Weren't any cranberry bogs involved, but it was some field, maybe an old house was there, who knows? But only, say, there were 5 acres of trees. I think what that bylaw is saying, that you could clear 2.5 acres of trees and leave the rest of the trees there. Not that you needed to leave 50% of the entire parcel treed. It may not be treed to start with.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying you couldn't even remove 25% of the trees that were
Instead
there.
of saying of the property, should we say of the land taken for the solar project?
That's why I said project footprint.
Yeah,
But,
that are more,
Because this is gonna basically come down to calculation, like owning a piece of property, I'm gonna put a house on it. I mean, if I look at my property, right? My property's like a piece of pizza pie. It's like a slice of pizza. It's 180 foot on the front, and it goes back 600 feet, and it narrows to 90 feet in the back. I could only put my house in certain spots on that property with the side setbacks. I couldn't go way back, 2/3 of the way back, because the property will narrow down. So they're gonna want this footprint. And based on these setbacks of 200 feet, and so much woodland on the property, and we gotta run through a couple different scenarios. You're only gonna be able to put a certain size array on there, which it'll be cost prohibitive. You're gonna need a monstrous piece of property. to
What's the
do this.
minimum size you need,
130,000.
to have a feasible solar array?
depends on where they're.
Is it 3 acres, 5 acres?
Probably more like 5 acres.
Yeah.
So basically, you're saying you need a minimum of 10 acres to have a 5-acre solar array. You're gonna need 200 feet from residential property lines. Right? So they have to take all those calculations into effect. Maybe they need more if they got residents all around them.
Rochester won't look at your property unless you get a minimum of 6 acres, for a 4-acre field.
Yeah.
Off the bat. I mean, the solar companies have a template that they have, they work with right off the bat. When they come to your place, first thing they'll tell you, let me see a plot plan of your property. Whatever you got for a layout, they're gonna tell you if it works or not, in a minimum of 6 acres. Rochester right now, well, there's a solar company right now, a new one, is talking pedestal mounted or in the box. They're gonna put them 10 feet above, so they can keep 61A, because they're high enough, they can
Sunlight
sow the
penetrates?
vines. They still get sun underneath, so they can manage the vines, whether they sell them, hand-pick the berries or whatever. It's still under 61A. What that does, what circumvents the, going into commercial. Because Rochester, if you put a solar field in now in the field, It changes from agriculture to commercial tax rate. Tax rate goes astronomically crazy. But this new company, they found another way to circumvent the law. They're thinking all the time. We're talking about how we can control solar now. They're 10 steps ahead of us. They're figuring what rules they come up with. We're gonna change them. How can we circumvent it? It's an ongoing game. It's a money chase, basically.
Marion just stopped one, didn't they? Under the clearing, large-scale clearing of woods?
Yeah. But Marion's
That's their
kind
bylaw.
of, Marion's kind of strange because Marion got enough money in that town. They spent millions of dollars trying to stop that 40B behind the Bruhoff. They scaled it way down, but they don't care. They don't. Dunkin' Donuts, look how long they got at Dunkin' Donuts before it came there. They spent a lot of money, and it became who had the biggest pockets. You know, we're just fodder.
See, my brother put up 2 of these solar farms out in the Berkshires. The whole get up to that was a tie into the grid.
Well, that's becoming a problem on here now, too. Right now, what they're looking at, this new company, is looking at where's the easy tie-ins. CMAS is a major tie-in. You're gonna see a trough, come right down that trough in Rochester. There's people signing right now contracts because they figure they can tie in, because if you try to get it on the grid, it's 2-3 years out before you can go. Borrego told you that tonight.
You know what this is gonna do? It's gonna make it easier for you to regulate it and not put the onus on you, because it says, right now, it says a minimum of 50, which you can require more. So it's gonna take the pressure off you. They're gonna know that they're gonna have to be 200 feet away, minimally on that. I think any way you move, in any direction you move towards, you know, improving this article is a win-win. I mean,
All right, as far as the tree clearing goes, what's, the intent is to stop the large clearings.
Well, it all depends who's doing it. Now, let's go pick on agriculture again. The solar field, the old airport, Frogfoot. They mined 500,000 yards of sand out of there to clear cut everything under the realm of agriculture. It's supposed to be agricultural sand. That sand went every place in the state, went out of the state. Okay, now it's cleared, it's cleared land. There's no trees there to say, you're gonna save 50% of the trees
No, as an example, that airstrip was cleared for forever,
for years.
but now it's clear.
Charlotte Furnace Road.
but if you wanna put in a 100-acre solar farm, you're still gonna have to put aside
They got it.
200 acres. Cleared or not.
But they have the acreage, it's, you know.
It's all right, though.
Well, they're one of the few that have that volume of land. It would make it worthwhile to do. I mean,
Eaton owns quite a
Clinton
bit.
off of 44, there was an old gravel pit, that was, what was in there before? Universal Pre-Stress, way back. Cisco built a place right off of that one street. Further up, all that was all gravel pit, it was all solar panels, all in the valleys. There's a couple in there, an old gravel pit. They built a bog, prices went down, they turned it into solar panel. You don't even know what's there. It's down the hole. Ideal. You know, you get a town like Carver, it's a little bit different. Carver probably has 70% of its ground cover is cranberry bog, so it's under 61A. I mean, when that plant, and that's why their bylaws are real strict. But when they put up off Purchase Street, I thought the town was gonna come apart, it was so violent.
So what if you say, based on our current law right now, 50,000 square feet, if you say you need twice the volume of land, and you can't clear more than 50,000 square feet of woodlands?
That's a little over an acre, that's all.
I know, but it tells them that they can't clear more than 1 acre without a special variance. So you literally have to find a piece of land like was in front of us tonight that has nothing on it. Other than that, you can clear 1 acre, and that's it. You need twice the volume. So you want 10 acres of solar array, you need a 20-acre parcel, and of that, you can't clear more than 50,000 square feet of tree.
About no more than 50% of the footprint of the project may be cleared of trees, including trees cleared within the previous 5-year period, unless part of an approved forest management project or protection of an equal area of forested land is provided. Aerial photos may show the age of the tree clearing if. That sound like a solution?
Read it again. Read it again.
No more than 50% of the footprint of the project may be cleared of trees, including trees cleared within the previous 5-year period, unless part of a approved forest management plan or protection of an equal area of forested land. Aerial photos may be used to show the age of tree clearing if corresponding to the 5-year period.
In other words, if you wanted to have a 5-acre solar array, then you'd have to have 2.5 acres of land that does not have any tree growth to start with.
Yeah, you'd have to have at least that.
Yeah.
For at least 5 years.
Yeah, and you haven't cleared that within the last 5 years.
But,
To
so we,
start.
Should there be a caveat there in case you have a site that it makes sense to?
Well, like any bylaw, you could put a statement in there that, you know, any portion of this bylaw may be waived for good reason by the board.
Like say you're gonna go in and mow down, 5 acres of scrub oak. Nobody would miss that.
so the 200-foot parameter around there would substantially increase the size of the property that was gonna be needed.
The 200-foot buffer is a separate issue. This is,
No, I know, but but the 200-foot buffer, I'm back to saying having twice the amount of property needed for the array. The 200-foot buffer would actually force that issue, right?
Let me just see. what
Depending where your lot lines are.
I mean, basically every 200 feet, about
An
every,
acre. 200 feet deep, 200 feet long is an acre.
yeah.
Go all the way around it.
And of that, 50% of it needs to be vegetation based on the previous statement.
well, that's not really the intent of the 50%. The 50% is to try to address cutting down
The vi-
forested land for the strict sole purpose of putting solar panels in.
Doesn't put it on the beach to hell with it. You got plenty of beach, right?
Well, you got a huge landfill up there. Would be suited for
Well,
solar
knowing
panels.
what we learned tonight, do we have to say something about the perimeter road? Because that was a 20-foot perimeter road around here. That adds quite a bit of area.
Well, I think they need to be a little more flexible than that.
The
Just-
fire department?
Just a quick calculation. If you had 10 acres of land and it was a square, that's 660 feet on a side. If you take out a 200-foot buffer around that, that leaves you with a 260-foot box,
Yeah,
roughly 1 acre of land
yeah.
that you could put a solar array in.
It ain't gonna happen.
Out of how many? 10?
Yeah.
How many acres?
10.
10, you get 1.5?
10 acres is 435,000 square feet.
Yeah, right, I know
And I
that.
took the square root of that. That's 660 feet per side. Now you take out 200 on this side, 200 on that side, it leaves you with 260 in the middle. 260 by 260 is a little over an acre.
That's, I like that rule.
Sounds good.
Basically, leave one
Sounds good.
owner that could put up solar farms from here forward.
Sounds good.
Resolve the issue of residential proximity.
Yeah,
It would still allow you big, agricultural use. They would just have to be a little more creative.
Got all that written down, Charles?
Ken wrote it down. The decommissioning light remains the same. What else? You were just addressing that, right?
Yeah, that was the big item. Otherwise, go through it and check on grammar to make sure everything's
good.
clear.
On the,
clearly written.
on the use chart, it says SBR.
Right.
where the rest of our zoning charts say special permit planning or special permit zoning.
SPP, yeah.
Isn't that R supposed to be a P?
No, it was
Is it
specifically
supposed to be
done as a-
required, but it doesn't say by who?
Oh,
SPR was, site plan review is required under the bylaw by the planning board.
could we clarify that portion of the bylaw that talks about Board of Appeals and also the planning board? That was something that I brought up, and I think that Ken had talked about it with Richard Cirque, and to me, it was confusing. Because I think the intent for it being under the Board of Appeals was if there was some other issue that needed their attention, then it would become a Board of Appeals issue, but the language of it suggests that it's by the Board of Appeals anyway. I just wonder if we could clarify that a little bit.
Are you talking in regards to the
Well,
solar
Yeah,
Fi-
let me
five
find
being
it
a
first.
utility?
Let me find it first.
592.2 and .3. Page 43.
Yeah, there's a special permit granting authority and then a site plan review authority. It says the ZBA shall be the special permit granting authority for large ground-mounted solar energy facilities requiring a special permit under this bylaw. Then it says the planning board shall be the site plan review authority for large grounded-mounted solar energy facilities under this bylaw.
And then in the table of uses, SPR is identified as the use is allowed by site plan review, and SPZ is special permit from the Board of Appeals.
So in the case of the ones which we heard tonight, does that mean that the zoning board of appeals should have been the special permit granting authority? That was a question I asked right at the very beginning.
Right, and the way it was identified was that the site plan review is the permit for solar farms in the residential zoning districts, the R130 and the R60. And that is the planning board's purview.
And in commercial general or commercial planned, it's special permit zoning?
Yes, Board of Appeals.
Why?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. There's so much confusion. Can't we change this?
You can if you want to.
Site plan review in the body of this bylaw talks about it being a special permit. So it just seems to me that there needs to be some clarification as to when the zoning board is applying this and when the planning board is applying it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the question
Listen.
is, do you want to have a distinction between the Board of Appeals would be reviewing solar farms in the commercial districts or the residential, or the planning board is the review authority in the residential districts and the commercial districts?
Why not have one body do the approval? Why split it?
Yeah, I don't see the reason for it. You're going to get one point of view from one board, you're going to get another point of view from another board. What is the reason that you would apply different criteria to, say, the commercial zone than you would for the residential zone?
Well, in a matter of fact, our discussion here tonight has been on how we want to distinguish the residential districts and how the standards would apply differently to residential districts. So if you're thinking about a solar farm, say, on
Toby Road.
Toby Road, that's an industrial district, but let's say that's commercial. Is that more appropriately taken by the, under different standards?
What we have done in the past is if a project required some sort of relief from the Board of Appeals, then they would handle the special permit for site plan also.
Yeah.
Right.
To prevent applicants from having to do duplicate
Bouncing
hearings.
back and forth, yeah.
I think that we should treat this the same way, that, you know, we're the granting authority unless they need a use variance to say they wanted to go into industrial, which is a no. They'd need relief from the Board of Appeals.
Mhm.
And just let them handle it all the way through.
With the recommendations from us, like they normally get.
Right.
And I would think the same thing with the commercial, although from the standpoint of the land which is actually zoned commercial, it doesn't make any sense to have solar farms in those zones.
No, it doesn't.
There's no depth. That's completely surrounded by residential stuff.
Well, commercial general is listed, which,
Yeah, but that's a limited piece of land that is primarily now taken up by Wareham Crossing. The only thing that isn't is,
you could include the BDOT in that.
well, that's already in a residential zone.
Yeah, the underlying zoning is R130, all right.
It's R60, I think.
But it's treated as commercial general by project, right? They have that option.
But not for, but you'd have to distinguish a commercial project from a solar farm.
Well, can you go back to your statement on solar being a utility? Because the statement I was gonna make, which came up with Squirrel Island is, which I agree with, this is actually a manufacturing process. You're manufacturing electricity.
I think when you look at the use chart, they kind of treat it like it fits in as utility, right?
Yeah, it is a utility.
So we're talking about a variance for utility in a residential area?
Special permit, yeah. Yeah, by that definition, you would think it'd be reversed, that the zoning board would do the R130 and 160. Maybe we have to check the use thing and cross-reference utility, make sure it's consistent.
Whoever does it, there has to be regulations governing, or should be, in my opinion, setbacks from existing, homes or other structures or roads. And if it goes into the zoning board of appeals, they can just say, no, you don't need that, right? So there's a utility for having it on this board, because they can't seek relief from the 200-foot setback from residential houses.
Is there any restriction on flood zone?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't think so.
And should there be any exemptions for town-owned land or incentives?
We're putting solar on town-owned land. Question, would you want to have a raised structure over the parking lot beside Town Hall here?
Yeah.
Then we should have an exemption for,
Well, you've already exempted, ground-mounted solar is treated differently, so. Then, structure-mounted solar, canopies and like,
yeah, canopies
are
are
treated like
defined.
as building mounted.
We could change that around easy enough, if it isn't already.
Which, yeah, you have on-site solar energy, it's all yes across the board.
Ken, would your proposal completely eliminate the design standard section under the current bylaw?
I'm sorry, what is that again?
Would your proposal, the way you've written, the way we've been discussing it tonight, would that simply replace the current bylaw under design standards?
It would only replace the clear cutting of trees and the setback requirements under the standards.
Okay,
It'd be
I
in
would think,
place of the other
I
design
would think then that we need to take a look at the entire existing bylaw to make sure that if that simply goes in there in that one place, that we don't have a contradiction of terms or contradiction of regulation and requirement. because if it happens that way, it's gonna be a mess. Just think we need to take whatever changes want to be made and then compare that to the rest of the language in the bylaw to see if there are any conflicts in it, that's all.
Of course. That's part of the discussion we have.
Yeah,
You look at 594,
yeah.
a special permit may be granted if the zoning board of appeal finds that.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about here, that there are conflicts and things. You need to look at the entire bylaw to make sure that by making a change in one place, you're not making a problem in another, that's all.
Well, they just granted a permit, didn't they?
Hmm?
For a solar field?
Who?
The Specialty Zoning Board of Appeals?
They did, but that was under a court order.
Well, it was an agreement, but, I mean, they're the ones that oversaw the
They
hearing
did,
on that.
they did, because it was a,
Resolution to a situation.
it was.
Where is that going?
That's going on Route 28,
Next to the water tower?
between the water tower at West Wareham and Great Hill Mobile Home Park, up on the hill.
Sweet idea.
Right across the street from the place that's got all the trucks now.
Oh,
Right directly across Cranberry Highway, up behind those two buildings that are up on that hill.
Have we agreed to revise 592.2 such that the planning board shall be the special permit granting authority? Have we agreed to this?
Well, I think that's where we're headed, because there's a lot of contradictions here. Well, in the bylaw as to who's.
And then, George, you expressed it very nicely. If there is a special requirement, we want to put a solar in industrial, then they go to the ZBA, okay. But the planning board still retains site plan review, correct?
Well, in the case, if they were gonna go to ZBA for some relief of some sort, then what we've tried to do in the past is have them do the site plan at the same time, so as not to make them go
I
through
see, I
duplicate
see.
hearings.
Yeah.
But with recommendations from this board.
That's fine. Yes, adding to the confusion, 594.2 says, shall meet the requirements and standards for industrial uses found in Article 7. So,
Yeah, there's also another section in there with respect to landscaping too, which there may be some changes that need to be made to that in addition because of the, if we're talking 50 to 100% blockage
What?
because of vegetation, you go to the landscape requirements where it talks about mounds and
Shade trees.
shade trees and all that sort of stuff, it doesn't apply, so you have to be careful not to overlook stuff like that. It becomes important, especially when it refers to another section of the bylaw.
594.13 talks about the building not less than 50 feet or more is determined as the sole discretion of the grantee. Well, what if a building obstructs the vision?
It's their building, I suppose they can.
yeah, but you can't see, but you shouldn't see it from the second floor of that building.
If it's residential,
You mean if it's a commercial, you can still look at the solar?
that's right. It doesn't, the way it's written now, it doesn't apply to commercial.
Well, what do we do, like the one on County Road, where the neighbors, the abutters said, yes, we want this?
Then you go to the Board of Appeals and get a variance.
Well, the first thing is, if it was under this bylaw, they wouldn't be doing it within 200 feet of the lot boundary anyway. That's the first thing. You wouldn't be within that 50-foot buffer like they've got. It would be slightly different. But it's things like that you're trying to direct people away from.
Well, there's a case of, we'd rather have a solar field behind us than a 7-lot subdivision.
Right, right. And under the conditions that were available for a solar company to go in and do that, they could do it under the provisions, and those people were happy. In that case, if you had the 200-foot setback and you had to have the very dense vegetation, it still would have worked out probably, because that entire array is down in a hole. So if you had that dense vegetation up there, you probably would never see it.
So, what's the game plan?
Let's revise, let me revise the regulation in accordance with the discussion tonight, bring it back to the next planning board meeting.
And see if we can
And
compare
each
it
of
to
us-
other sections of the bylaw?
Right.
Each of us can contribute comments about it, and we take this home and read it and make comments and send them to you.
Sure.
But, okay. I think we just need to narrow down, if you're saying February 4th is the submission for town meeting?
No, I don't know when the warrant.
February 4th is the last day to submit articles. You could submit a placeholder article.
Yeah.
February
But-
4th, as long as you want to take forward solar bylaw at this town meeting. If you feel prepared for that, then we'd put a placeholder in.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
all I
all
was-
for that. I think we gotta get this squared away, or we're just gonna get in this pissing contest.
All I was,
Squirrel Island Road over and over again.
all I was saying, Mark, was hold off on the public hearing
Yeah,
until we're sure that everything is in place the way you want to see it.
yeah. So,
Otherwise, you'll have modifications which theoretically every time should have gone to the town clerk, and I don't know if it did. It just makes it difficult, that's all.
so we're saying take forward a place setter for solar. I think we're agreeing with that, I guess. And then a place setter for the site plan review, which we're saying is done. And then what's the next place setter? The design guidelines?
Well, I think the nuisance, or the front yard storage, I think you have to tackle that, and the sign bylaw as well.
Well, your grants, you're gonna put a place setter in for your grants, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
That's more free money. The sign bylaws was proposed by the selectmen.
Right.
Why can't they bring that forward themselves?
We don't trust them.
Good example in the sign bylaw.
Have they made recommendations?
Have you through? They're gonna fine you if you leave a sign up, they're gonna add it to your tax bill. And I think, one of the selectmen said, if you don't like it, change it next time around.
The problem I have with this is the same as the nuisance storage. Who is gonna enforce it? Because every time there's an opportunity to reduce the signage and bring it within specs, we just let it keep going. Harbor Freight, why do they need 5 fluorescent signs on that old Benny's building to say we should have adjusted that this go-around. Why does Buzzards Bay Garage need a billboard out there for that little car lot out there? It looks like the Vegas Strip going down the Cranberry Highway. Who's gonna enforce this?
How about the Very Life sign?
Life sign.
Well, they,
What, in front of the police station?
No, the one in front of the hospital,
I know what you're saying.
The same one in front of the police station.
you don't want them to get lost when they're looking for the place. Well, they come on Saturday.
come on, yeah, that's,
So my issue is, I have no problem supporting this stuff, is if the town can show us the mechanism and how they're going to enforce it. Because otherwise, we just sit here and embarrass ourselves and we set these criteria that doesn't get enforced.
Did the selectmen have some suggestions on what they wanted for changes in the sign bylaw?
Yes, there's a draft of the bylaw changes that were submitted last time around.
Oh,
And the reason it comes through the planning board, it's a zoning bylaw change. It's not a town bylaw, right? It's a zoning bylaw.
That's right, it's not a general bylaw.
First, someone comes,
Back in, I was going home.
someone gives it to the selectmen, gives them an idea, they say, okay, and then they give it to you guys to look at it, to finesse it, whether you approve it or you don't approve
Oh,
it.
we
Goes
have-
back to them, and they say, we'll put it in, right?
We have to hold a public hearing.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can make recommendations, but let the zoning board bring it forward. Or the selectmen.
Which one are you referring
I'm
to?
talking about the sign bylaw.
Signed by law.
Mr. Chairman, we're just discussing, you know, if February 4th is the day for place setters of town meeting, what are the few items?
Yeah, I don't remember what the changes in the sign bylaw were.
It was timing on the removal of signs, and size.
They were changing the sign, what's eliminate content-based criteria?
That's because of a Supreme Court case. The U.S. Supreme Court that said you can't have a bylaw that distinguishes between the content.
Oh,
What, give me an example of that?
In a particular case, it was that they said a religious group couldn't have a directional sign. And the Supreme Court said, just because they have religious content, you can't regulate it, distinguish that sign differently from a sign that does not have.
you're in violation, by the way.
Who is?
You,
Well, on what?
one of your signs is still on Route 58.
Oh, a selectmen, vote for me sign?
I saw it there yesterday. I go, oh, that's still there. It's in the,
58.
it's in the guardrail.
Oh. Well,
Board of Appeals.
still don't understand that. You got a directional arrow that says this way to Jesus?
Yeah, and you can't regulate that differently than a sign saying this way to an oil change.
So it, okay. Okay, so,
You can say all signs, no matter what the content, have to be a certain size if they're saying they're a directional sign.
so when we have this big blinking sign on the Cranberry Highway that says shuttle bus to the pot factory, we would have been in violation of that?
Well, plus the lettering changes too quickly.
So, okay.
LED signs are different, yeah, that you can regulate.
Yeah,
It's just you can't
Which we got
regulate.
a new one out front.
like the
right?
blinding one outside.
Yeah, that one, I don't know if that's.
By the way,
So,
They might have toned it down a little bit, it's not quite so bad.
Oh, really? Reduce the power consumption?
I meant to ask, you know, that sign, they put 2 posts in the ground, cement. Then
and
they
they
came
took
back
one
and
down.
cut one off.
Hmm.
And then they came back and put it back. What'd they attach it to?
this new one out front here? All right.
So solar, the site plan. What do you want to do with the sign? Look at the changes and see if
Read
it's
it.
ready to go? Is-
have to read it.
So I'll send it around, I'll send what
Yeah.
was put out last town meeting, send it around, you can look at it again.
And then shouldn't David come and talk about the nuisance?
He's talked about it quite a bit, but he can do it again, I'm sure.
But I mean, in a work session like this, where we can sort of focus on the conclusion, rather than just general commentary.
Well, the specifics are that he's looking to have boats and campers put into the front yard storage. One of the controversial things, though, he also asked for was a screening by a fence. And that, I think that would require some additional discussion, but the idea of putting in additional items that are regulated is not a bad idea from what I've seen around town.
It's been a while since that meeting. Would you mind sending us the verbiage?
Yeah. I'll do that.
The,
So you'll have another meeting before the 4th, when the placeholder articles have to be in.
well, we don't, unless you want to schedule one, unless the board would like to schedule one.
The 28th we have.
28th.
Oh, did you? Because it's not in the book. Gonna meet the 28th? Oh, 2nd and 4th. I was looking at the holiday one, okay.
Yeah, we're not gonna meet on Martin Luther King Day. So you have that next meeting when we can go over these again, and I think we have a light agenda in terms of development projects before us.
Do you think you'll be able to make the adjustments to the solar bylaws before then?
I'll try.
What was your proposal for the design review committee?
We haven't done anything on it. Oh, excuse me. In the Article 15 section, we have included the requirement that an applicant do participate with planning director, planning board member, and any other member of an agency that has jurisdiction over a project to have an informal review. That's in the new article. What we don't have is I've shared thoughts with Charlie and with Ken about this. Gentlemen, there's a new building in town, which is a visual disaster. I can't mention names. And there is no way that the town has to control that. And I think that there should be an independent design committee that I'm not talking about somebody wanting to put a deck addition to their house. I'm talking about these large projects that are plucked on the town without any control. And I think the only way I've seen other towns and municipalities control it is with a design review committee. Some people call it historic district committee, some people call it, but the purpose of such of an agency is to sit and review designs of buildings and how they impact the neighborhoods and the town. But Ken speaks, I've talked with Ken about this, and Ken thinks we should do it in a slower manner. Ken, go ahead.
Well, the idea that what I've seen that's successful in other towns is that there's some proof made of the value in design review. So that at first it's an advisory recommendation to the planning board or the Board of Appeals. And when you've shown success in that regard and proved that it's a viable methodology, then you build on having it more formalized as a committee.
Well, my problem with that is usually when they've already got a design and they've come to you at that point. I think we need to beef up our criteria. So when they're designing a project, before they step through the door, they kind of know what's expected of them.
Yes, you're right, and that's what's in Article 15 now. We've weaved that in. Yeah. So that, exactly, they haven't spent all kinds of time and dollars on completed plans. Because the time that I've been on the board, we've been faced with stuff that has had a lot of effort put into it, and then they resist making changes because, so I think we've covered in Article 15 that there has to be this informal review where they know what we expect. But the problem, and it's when the design is completed that you have no chance to, or being developed and being completed, that you have no chance to say, And frankly, and the last 2 years, Wareham has been victimized, I believe, visually by 2 very large projects, and they're terrible, they're awful. Now, if people don't care, that's, you know, I just feel that the town, the motto, Wareham Pride,
Well, one of them that you're thinking of, it wouldn't have cost him any money, any more money, to make it look nice.
yeah, but absent the town having somebody to say. But I agree, Ken, I mean, I'm open, I just want to see us be able to do something to prevent those things.
I think the other aspect to this, and something that George has touched on and you and I have discussed, is to go back to the design guidelines themselves, the standards that are in the regulations already, and modify those ones so you get the kind of look that you want, that you don't necessarily allow boring architecture.
Agreed, but there's no enforcement capability.
Well, there will be if the standards are in there and you have the projects going through review.
But they don't come, but the projects that I'm talking about didn't come before us. The 2 horrible buildings that I've seen in the last 2 years, they didn't come before the planning board.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to address, which is, we didn't have on the list, is what we intended to be some relief from people trying to add on to existing sites was the 9 parking space rule, that if it required less than 9, you didn't, well, the intent was if you had an existing site and you wanted to add an addition on it, or a second floor onto it, you wouldn't have to go into full site plan review and spend the money on that when you weren't really changing your parking lot, you weren't changing your drainage, you weren't, you know, the site wasn't really changing. Back, I don't know how many years ago, we used to have site plan review and minor site plan review, but they were virtually the same thing. And to try to give relief to existing sites that just wanted to expand a little, we went back to the 9 parking space thing. And it's not, you know, that, by the time we find out about it, we go, oh, that should have come before us. It's already permitted, it's already built.
You might want to just take a look at section, if I've got the right zoning bylaw here, it's 1562, it's pre-application review. It says to promote a better understanding and avoid misunderstanding of applicants shall submit preliminary or completed plans and materials under section 1530, but if they've already got the stuff done, it's like Emmanuel says, it's too late. That section maybe needs to be reworked to say that prior to the submittal of any formal application, the applicant shall sit down with the town planner and any other people that you want to suggest to gain an understanding of the overall concept of the project with very basic information, not taking away from what's required to be included, but to make it a requirement that they sit down at a preliminary stage before any of this detailed information ever gets generated to help promote what's going to be done, but also to reduce the initial cost, which I know is a concern. We've heard that from different people, that they go to a great expense to improve and submit all these plans. Now you want us to change them. The idea is to ferret out the changes that you might like to see before they get to that stage. So it might take a rewording of that particular section. Even though we have a pre-application review, all it does is say, look it over and see that it conforms to all the submittal requirements. By that time, it's too late. So that pre-application conference ought to be something which is even pre to that. So if somebody wants to promote any kind of a project, any part of a, say, a multifamily project or anything, they come in with a plan of the property, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're thinking our density might look like. Here's a rough sketch of what we do for architecture, and here's what we'd like to promote here. What do you think about this? It's at that stage that you talk about those things, and not wait until the full application's been submitted and then tear it all apart, because they've spent thousands of dollars on plans.
And that's
That's the goal.
proposed, if I may read it, I mean,
Yeah.
in our proposal for revising, it's Article 1562, pre-application review, and we want to replace the existing paragraph with, to promote better understanding and to avoid misunderstanding, applicants shall submit conceptual plans to the town planner for informal review to ensure that the requirements of Section 1530 will be met. Participants in the informal review process shall include a member of the planning board or more, as well as representatives of other town boards, commissions, and departments in accordance with Section 1565.2, that the town planner determines would have jurisdiction over the project. The intent of this paragraph is to provide the town boards, commissions, and departments the opportunity to become familiar with the concept and scope of the application and to offer input to the applicant regarding its appropriateness. And so,
See, that should be the first paragraph in the site plan review. It shouldn't be a separate.
But it has to be a part of the process. It can't be just the purpose, although it can be stated as a purpose, but it needs to be a part of the application process or a pre-application process, so that you pull people in to actually have that discussion.
You know what I'm saying, that when some engineer
know.
or architect in California looks at Wareham site plan review, that should be the first paragraph.
It should, but then it ought to be repeated again under procedures, because you need to get somebody in here to be able to sit down and talk with somebody, and not just make it, this is what, this is what the town of Wareham wants under site plan review. It talks about that a little bit in the purpose, in that whole purpose of 1510, it talks about a lot of the things that are there. But it needs to be a part of a procedure, so that somebody, when they, okay, what have I got to do to get this in front of the planning board? Oh, I got to go before them informally to talk with the town planner and just give them an overview of what we're doing, without any real detail, just general concepts. The idea of access, egress, what roads are it on? You're going to have to get a state permit? You're going to be on sewer? You're going to be on septic system? What are you going to do?
A few years back, there was a group, what they call themselves the Cabinet.
You're right, George.
And it was the Board of Selectmen, the town administrator, the police chief, I don't know if the fire chief.
Board of Health was involved, fire
Board of
chief
Health.
was there.
And I think it was everybody but planning. I don't know if the town planner was involved.
Yes, he was, because he's the one, it wasn't Chuck Rickus, it was somebody before him.
And they would sit and meet with applicants and see what was required, what you needed, everything. And they would make all these deals, but the results were not translated to the land use boards. So you had an applicant, we had one particular applicant who thought he was coming in to get a rubber stamp on an approval, and we started having a public hearing, and the guy got mad and stormed out and sicked his lawyer on us. So it has to be clear that it's advisory and they're still subject to, public hearing process.
Oh, yeah.
and I do believe that the process does require a later review also, because the preliminary discussion, we have no assurance that they're going to listen to our suggestions. And look, I've worked in several towns and with different boards, with different design review committees, and it always works out for the better when the designer of the project and the owner take into consideration the environment in which they're designing. So this is a great start that we have here. I just, I'm open-minded to how we do it, but we should really try to get a procedure that will prevent the atrocities that we've seen that I've seen in the last 2 years. And it is. I love this town too much to see it being ruined like this. So,
What else do we need?
motion to adjourn?
Okay. Need that. You got all the signed decisions, right, Ken?
Yeah, I have all the signed decisions and these are the photos.
Okay, a motion's been made to adjourn.
That's an all, wrap it up.
Second? That sounded like a second. Patrick said it. All in favor?
All right.
Opposed? So moved.